Hello and welcome to the RWBY podcast. I am Adam's discarded mask, Mediocrity 4.
High-powered, the train that went through the tunnel, and that was about it. Also, there's an Italian man knocking at my door asking for money. I just went to the Ducati dealership. I didn't sign up for this.
Disappointment is tough to deal with sometimes. I am the second punch that Oscar never got hit with, but truly deserved. I am dude.
And there was a whole conversation about motorcycles earlier, so I guess I'm just a Japanese motorbike Yamazaki. No, I'm Soxcalibur.
Ooh, that's a good whiskey.
Just say Yamasaki.
Yeah.
I mean, Yamazaki is a really good whiskey distillery, so owned by Suntory. I'm actually literally drinking their sister brand, Hakushu, right now. So, you know.
That sounds really good.
Hakushu's a slightly more peated style. Yamazaki's the slightly more, kind of more Speyside, sweeter style, because the Japanese learned distilling from the Scottish, not the Americans, which was the right move to do. As an American, the Scotch are better.
I mean, the Japanese learned how to make beer from the Germans, and they're the best at it.
Yeah, they did better than the Americans did. Well, besides our craft breweries, but our standard shit is way worse than Japan's or Mexico's.
Actually, Sapporo just started up a factory nearby me, up in Richmond. Not really nearby, but apparently they're going to start distributing here. So that'll be cool.
Yeah, nice.
I, being the lovingly cherished cum sock of Adam, am poop.
Yeah.
So yes, RWBY Volume 6, a volume that I have been on record saying is the best, or at least it is the closest to what I want from this series and what I have always wanted from this series. Is it still, a couple volumes later, do I still feel that way? Well, I'll save that thought for the end. But Dude and I watched this together a few weeks ago now to take notes and stuff. This volume didn't really have a whole lot going on behind the scenes, other than the backlash surrounding Volume 5, and a lot of the stuff, especially in the first 2 to 3 episodes, I feel like is a direct response to all the criticisms from Volume 5, which were all valid criticisms, but considering that the writers are not the best, they sometimes responded to those criticisms in very lampshady ways that didn't really show signs of improvement. This is, I think, more of an issue when we get to Volume 7, but let's just jump right into a mistake that they made with Volumes 4 and 5 that they did not rectify with Volume 6, which was funneling production costs into a character short to build up hype. And Adam character shorts, I'm gonna be honest, it's the worst of the 9 character shorts that we've gotten over the course of the series. This is the weakest one.
I debate that for one very, very important reason. Sienna Khan. I rest my case.
I back that up.
Adam.
I second this.
Thank
Totally
you, Sock. Thank you.
I feel like a lot of the things with Adam this volume, including this short, were kind of done to sort of bandage up the character somewhat shoddily.
Oops, we made your big bad fucking joke in the last volume before he even got his main villain arc going. Oops.
And in fairness, they do make him more of a threat again, but it's too little too late. Kind of thing. I mean,
the guy got faulted last volume,
yeah,
easily.
You can't come back from that is the problem. I mean, I'm glad they upped his power level back up to kind of where it used to be before in this volume. It's better that he is the way he is in Volume 6 than if they just kept him the way he was in Volume 5. Obviously, that would have been untenable, and that would have made the whole fight scene near the end of this volume that we're going to talk about in, let's say, 2 hours and 45 minutes from now, that would have been a lot worse. But it's still you guys already fucked him. That's already happened. So what they did was the best. I would argue it's almost the best they could do given the situation they put themselves in. It's just the problem is that they put themselves in that situation. So they have no one to blame but themselves. So what the fuck?
Yeah, I would say probably along the same lines. I'm really not certain what else they could have done. The kind of from day one almost, the entire deal with the White Fang was it was not great in almost any respect. I kind of get them wanting to just finally end it this volume so they didn't have to deal with it anymore.
Volume 5 was so bad. I'm pretty sure I haven't listened to it since, but I'm pretty sure I basically just checked out for the whole second half of the Volume 5 podcast. I just couldn't even be bothered to give a fuck anymore at that point. I was just yeah, it's just bad. What do you even say? And Volume 6 has to kind of pick up the pieces, and in some ways it kind of does, in some ways it kind of doesn't. I will say that I was surprised watching through this volume this time around. And I know media was surprised by my thoughts this time around when we watched it together. And I actually won't spoil it this time.
The short itself, that one seemed like it was kind of trying to explain Adam, but due to the fact that it was a short, it didn't really do it all that well because it didn't have enough time, I think. Giving him like some portion of a backstory that didn't really have a lot of room to operate in, I don't know if that was even worth doing.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of this, and also the song that accompanies it, Lionize, is that Adam was just a White Fang dude who kept on getting, like, rewarded for his bad behavior. He got positive reinforcement for negative actions, and that's why he became such a massive dickhead. But at the same time, he was kind of always that. Like, we don't really see... The biggest problem I have with the short is that there's only one scene with him and Blake, and we don't get an explanation for what Blake ever saw in him, because it just seems like he was always kind of a dickhead. He just didn't have as many opportunities to be a dickhead before Blake left, or before that moment, but he was always like finding excuses for his murder psychoness, and it just... The problem with this whole character arc is that it's very flanderized, and this is a problem that I think RWBY does suffer from in a lot of different cases, off and on. And I think Adam is probably the biggest victim, at least as far as the villains go. He's the biggest victim by far. There's a couple of heroes that Nora, I think RWBY, in this volume specifically, I feel like she gets a little flanderized in volumes 6 and 7, and then she kind of gets a lot of her character traits back as volume 8 and 9 rolls out. That's the thing, like, so long as a character is still around, you can rebound them, you can revamp them, you can fix the problems, you can have Adam go away, go on his, like, training arc, and then come back stronger than ever. This is how a lot of these types of stories tend to be written. But Adam never really gets that opportunity. Adam never gets the opportunity to be a deeper character than this, and you have this whole character short that's supposed to, like, flesh him out, but then it ends up just being a bunch of shit that we already knew. Like, there's nothing really new about Adam's character that gets introduced here. It confirms some stuff, like it confirms that, yes, he is the one who had the idea for the Grimm masks. That's something that was alluded to in Volume 2 that never got addressed again, but now it's back.
But does that even really matter that much?
No, it doesn't. That's the problem. Like, none of the stuff that is revealed here matters. It doesn't matter that Sienna Khan rewarded him for killing in self-defense while Gira gave him a firm finger waggling, because, like, we don't have any established history between Adam and Gira. We don't have anything to really compare it to. There's no fall. He's just at rock bottom the whole time.
We don't even know how Gira feels about Adam, like, arguably manipulating and probably almost certainly manipulating his daughter and all this kind of... we don't even
I'd
have
imagine he probably doesn't like it that much. I can probably infer that pretty easily,
I would assume Gira did not like Adam.
I don't recall Gira ever mentioning Adam.
He didn't give an opinion on it, so.
My point of that is, the weird thing about it is then, like, why did the Belladonnas, why did Gira and Callie just let Blake be part of the White Fang still, when it's pretty obvious, like, a huge part of why she stayed with the White Fang was to be in a relationship with Adam, or due to her relationship with Adam.
When she was 12, by the way.
He went away,
So
no?
if Gira didn't like that, then why did they not address that? Or why did we not ever get him trying to do anything about it? It doesn't make sense. And by the way, I already know the answer to my question. It's that Rooster Teeth realized, oh, this is something that people will view as problematic if we explore it too much, so we're just going to gloss over it completely.
Well, Gira and Callie, you see, they're very new age. They understood that you got to let your daughter find herself and go on her own journey, You can't be too up in her business all the time about stuff. And if that means being part of a terrorist organization, then cool, Every girl's got to find her own path.
I mean, yeah, that is the way they come across, which is another problem I have with Volume 4. But anyway, we're not talking about Volume 4.
Well, the question reminds, would it have been better if we had just actually, like, instead of like a short, made it just like an actual episode, but get like a little bit more of him as a kid?
Well, yeah,
or,
I would agree with that, like, as part of it, yes.
Him getting his, like, brand, him spending more time with, like, Blake and stuff like that.
Well, I feel like you could maybe intersperse like smaller flashbacks throughout the volume
Yeah.
probably with that, because like he's stalking them throughout the volume. You could
Yeah.
have him stalking them, and then he remembers, oh, this was how this was, or maybe Blake recalls something and tells about it. You could do it like that.
Adam through his rage manages to like overcome the apathy. Like that could be cool.
The thing with Adam is they just pussyfoot around with him the entire series, and especially after like volume 4. And it's like, okay, is he a creepy statutory rapist, wacko? Okay, if that's what he is, then let's explore that. And who cares if it's quote unquote problematic? Like that would be at least something to explore and would make us more sympathetic toward Blake. Or is he just like really, really angry at the humans and we're supposed to feel a little more sympathetic toward him and he wasn't that manipulative to Blake? Okay, fine. I could accept that too, but we don't explore that either. We just don't know. And again, I think the answer was Monty's original idea probably was the creepier side, and they just were like, oh, wait a minute. We'll probably get a lot of backlash from fucking normies and, quote unquote tourists if we explore this aspect to his character, so we're just not going to do it.
I feel like they didn't have a clear plan with him other than just him being a foil for Blake. The more undercooked Blake's arc is, the more undercooked Adam's plot is by proxy, because they are supposed to be foils for each other. And this is something that I've noticed as we've gone through this retrospective series, is that like Blake doesn't talk about Adam enough, I feel like. He's supposed to be this big looming presence over her entire life. She spent 5 years with him, but she never talks to her friends about him. She never warns them about him. She only ever mentions him as like a mentor. And I know that the age gap isn't actually all that extreme. There's only like a 3 to 4 year age gap between them. I think they've said that Adam was like 20 to 21 in volume 1, like in the Black trailer, while Blake was like 16, 17 at that time. So it's a 5 year age gap at most. That's not a whole lot. It is a whole lot when that 5 years is in that time period. Like the time period between like 15 and 12 to 17 or 15 to 20, like that's a long 5 years. But that wouldn't be important if they didn't throw the whole relationship aspect to them in our face in volume 3, because that kind of came out of nowhere. Like it was never really implied that they were a thing until he was like, hello my darling, hello my baby, hello my darling, hello my ragtime gal.
I love that frog.
That's a great frog. Yeah, best frog of all time. But
Yeah.
no, and that's my point. Is like, I mean, personally, I would have preferred if they kept the way he kind of was in the early trailer and volumes 1 and 2. If he was just kind of like a mentor thing, I would have preferred that personally. But like, if you're gonna make him the creepy ex-boyfriend, then you gotta make him the creepy ex-boyfriend. And it's like, guys, it doesn't matter. They're fucking pixels. We've had this discussion before. It doesn't fucking matter. They're pixels. It's not real. So fuck off. You can explore whatever you want in fiction.
Also, he's the bad guy, so you can get away with a lot more.
Yeah, that too. Exactly. So it's like
no one's glorifying it. No one's glorifying it.
Yeah, my point
Yeah,
is
people probably getting a little weird if Ruby and Oscar ship was like actually gonna happen, because like what, Ruby's in like her early 20s now.
Nah, she's still late teens.
I've talked about this. The Oscar Ruby age gap is 2 years. That's nothing. That isn't. I mean, again, they're fictional characters. They're pixels. Who gives a fuck? It doesn't matter.
Guys, it does
my point is with.
Because the age gap might be short, but the height gap there is very wide.
That part's a little more difficult for Oscar to overcome. Yeah, that's true. But my point is with Adam, it's like, just make a decision, guys. Like, he's changed a lot and he's been very inconsistent. And it's like, can you just decide what he's gonna be? And they never decided what he's gonna be, so they just decided that he would be dead.
Yeah, he's the most mishandled character in the at least in the top rankings of the most mishandled character in all of RWBY.
Absolutely.
And he deserves better. I might get some hate comments for it, but certain characters in like Final Fantasy, it's just like they deserve better.
Well, he does deserve better because it would have given Blake better. Like,
it would have made the whole show better, basically.
Yeah.
I have done him better. Like,
it gives me like emotional whiplash, because it's like, how am I supposed to feel about this character? It's constant like, oh, he's so cool. It's like, what about the crew? What about them? Like, oh, he's so cool. And then it's just like, hello, darling. It's like, oh, he's a creep. He's all over the place. I don't know how to feel about this character. I think he's cool, and I would like to see more of him, but no, it's just he's all over the place. There's 5 Adams. I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, that is a huge part of the problem, and I would say he is the worst villain in the series. I would argue, and that's a big problem because he's so important to a character that for the first half of the show is basically the worst character in the show or the most damaging character to the show, which is Blake. And if Adam had been better, then I think Blake would have been better. So it's like, I don't care about like him getting better for himself. I don't give a shit about that. He needs to have been a better character, and that could have meant making him a worse person, more evil, whatever, more manipulative, more creepy, or less. Fine, but just like define what he is, and that would have helped define Blake's character more as well. And that's where it really fucks things up.
Yeah, because imagine if they had actually done like name any like kind of character pair like that was supposed to have like a thing like between like Blake and Adam, and they just do that to those characters in any sort of like trope. It's like no.
Well, I'm thinking that like even with how like not great it was itself, it was still better than Blake and Adam was Yang and her mom. That worked out far better than the other two, and even that wasn't all that great.
The writers don't do foils well, because I was just thinking that Blake and Adam are foils, and Blake's kind of the only one of the main girls who has a clear-cut foil. Like, Yang and Mercury are supposed to be foils, but Mercury's barely a character.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like,
Ruby and Cinder are foils, but only because Cinder has this one-sided hate boner for her. Like, that's not much to go off of.
I mean,
Ruby looking at Cinder in the elevator, I don't even think about you at all.
An interesting foil has, like, different comparisons and contrasting elements to them. Like, you know, that Deku and Shigaraki from My Hero Academia. Sorry, it's fresh in my brain right now.
I was going to say Austin Powers and Dr. Evil would be the most.
That is legit a good one. Batman and Joker. Batman and most of his villains, honestly. Most of his, like, key villains all have, like, something really specific that parallels Batman. Batman and Scarecrow both use fear. Batman and Ra's al Ghul both fight criminals. Batman and Two-Face are both obsessed with duality. Batman and Catwoman both love BDSM gear.
Inigo Montoya and the Six Fingered Man.
One of the examples that really proves just how bad RWBY as a show is at doing foil is the fact that Yang actually has 2 or arguably 3 foils, which is that she has Mercury, but that only serves a purpose in like 1 volume and like maybe a quarter of that volume, and that's it. And then she's also supposed to have Neo as a foil, and that never goes anywhere after the first time either. And then you could argue that her mom maybe is supposed to be a foil to her, and that doesn't go anywhere either. So they can't even decide which character is the foil for a main character. And then they never do anything with any of them. So, like, what the...
And Weiss doesn't have a foil at all. According to those 2 openings, it's Emerald, but they don't ever actually fight. I guess you could say Jacques is a foil.
You know what? You just proved my point further, Media, because Weiss doesn't have a foil, and she's the best character in the series.
It really goes to show that when you give a bad writer more time, it just gives them more time to suck at their job.
I do think also...
Dude, that is not good news for Volume 10.
Here's my personnel issue on Adam. They knew they were going to kill him during the production of this volume. The thing that kind of irritates me is, like, they could have done some, like, cool shit with him, and they just did it. Like, he just shows up, and they have the fight, and he dies.
I'm gonna have more to say about that when we actually get to that fight. Let's put a pin in that.
So time for episode number 1.
Argus Limited. I hesitate to call this one of the better episodes of the volume, but Volume 6 is kind of the antithesis of Volume 2. In that Volume 2, everything felt good in the moment, but then when you look back on it, you realize how pointless 90% of Volume 2 was. Whereas Volume 6, everything feels kind of dull and pointless in the moment, but when I look back on it, at least, I see all the different connections, like, okay, this actually makes sense.
Okay, I'm going to argue with you right there, because I feel the exact opposite. I actually feel like this is almost the same as Volume 2. I'm going to tilt my hand now and just say, I fucking hated this volume on this last rewatch. I think it fucking sucks. And I have it rated almost the same as Volume 2. I actually think it is very similar to Volume 2 in that at the time I first watched it, I thought it was really good. And now watching it more recently and actually watching it episode by episode, I'm like, oh my god, most of these episodes are actually garbage and are, in fact, really quite damaging to the show overall, minus a few things here and there. I wanted to point that out because, like, Media and I think now this is probably the most we're going to disagree on anything, which is that I think he still mainly is cool with this volume, whereas I now think this volume is pretty much trash for the most part.
I think I would.
Which I didn't expect, because I didn't used to think that. I did not used to think that at all. I used to think this is one of the best volumes.
I mean, I'll withhold my judgment until you explain your side. I think I'm kind of leaning towards Media on it. Well, if we're just talking about, like, how necessary the volume was, well, the volume itself itself is basically them trying to get to Atlas, which they do need to do. So yeah, if we want to like get it down to the most basic level of necessity, yeah, they did need to do that. So the volume was necessary.
I'm not arguing that. I'm sorry. I was not arguing about necessity. I do agree that volume 2 is still less necessary than volume 6. I will not argue that at all. That has nothing to do with the quality of volume 6 because that premise existed from volume 5, which is the worst volume in the series. It still is. So that's not like a compliment to volume 6. That's not something you can give credit to volume 6. That is inherent to the volume as the premise is presented at the end of volume 5. So to me, it's more about how they go about doing that. And I don't think they go about doing it very well. So that's what I'll be arguing throughout this podcast.
Yeah, this episode actually has a pretty good example in Dude's favor, which is that, okay, one of the biggest complaints with Volume 5 was the lack of action and everyone sitting around talking around that jade coffee table and all the, like, dining room scenes and just them not doing anything for large stretches of the volume, and then when things do happen, it's horrible. It's even worse than the talking scenes. So this episode starts off with an action sequence. This is actually the quickest we've gotten to an action sequence in the show. In a volume. Like Volume 1, we got the opening exposition, which sucked, and then the fight scene. Volume 2, we had some build-up, and then we had the food fight. Volume 3, we had the scene with Ruby at her mom's gravestone, and then the Auburn fight. Volume 4, we had Meanwhile at the Legion of Doom, and then we had the Geist fight. Volume 5 didn't have an action sequence in its entire first episode, and even going forward, Volume 7, 8, and 9, they have, like, bits of action in their first episode, but it builds up to that action. This is the only volume that kicks it off with, like, nope, boom, we're in medias res, we're in an action sequence, and it's a pretty cool fight. They're on the train, fighting these Manticore Grimm, then they all have to, like, duck back into the train because they're getting ready to hit a tunnel, and then flash back to them at the train station, and it's just like, oh, we're not just starting in medias res, that was just a cold open, and now we're gonna play the scene that they would have played anyway if not for the backlash of Volume 5.
That's exactly. And I think Volume 6, and it's not as bad as the example I'm going to use right now, but to me, it is the Star Wars Episode 9 of RWBY, in that it is a direct response.
You're just shitting all over this thing, dude.
Yeah,
like,
regardless, I said it's not that bad. I said it's not anywhere near as bad as Episode 9. Episode 9 of Star Wars is the worst Star Wars thing maybe ever, okay? It's way worse than that, but it is similar in the sense that a lot of its flaws are due to them reacting to the backlash to the previous controversial installment, which is exactly what happened with Star Wars Episode 9. Is the biggest problem with Star Wars Episode 9, regardless of what you think about Star Wars Episode 8, some people still kind of like it. Some people think it's the worst. Some people think it's like okay, but has flaws, whatever. Everybody agrees that Episode 9 was the worst or one of the worst things ever because it was so obsessed with contrasting Episode 8 and being a response to and trying to be the opposite of Episode 8. And to me, a lot of the problems with RWBY Volume 6 are the fact that it is trying so hard to respond to Volume 5. And again, it's not anywhere near as bad as Star Wars Episode 9. It's not that bad. Not even just taking into account the budget. I mean, like, literally, objectively, RWBY Volume 6 as a product, as a story, is better than Star Wars Episode 9. Shows you how bad Star Wars Episode 9 is. I'm just saying it does have some of those traits where, yes, like, they're trying to do this fight. And this fight, there's some good parts to it, but, like, a lot of it is not very necessary, and it feels kind of tacked on just to have a fight scene in the beginning. And there's a lot of, like, awkward moments. One of the big things I point out every time is, like, Nora's line when she comes up from the train to start fighting, and she's like, why is it always something? Who wrote that line? Is that supposed to be funny?
When has it always been something?
Dude, just what's the point of that line?
Nora literally read the script.
Yeah.
And is like, I don't get it.
Shit like that is just, like, so stupid.
Why is it always something would have been a much better joke if more things happened in Volume 5.
And even then, you could still write a more clever line than that. Like, my God, guys, like, that's just awful. And it to me just exemplifies a lot of the things that are going on. This is another problem I had. Like, when Ozpin was talking about Dee and Dudley, it's like, I hope those weren't Beacon graduates. Bitch, how do you not know if they're Beacon graduates or not? Do you not remember your fucking students?
Also, worst part about that line is that he is making fun of assumingly Haven graduates knowing full well that Haven had been run by a guy who was in Salem's pocket.
Which he appointed, by the way.
Like, he is laughing at people dying because of his mistakes and the incompetence of Lionheart and the betrayal there. Like, it's just such a kind of a fucked up line, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, it is.
And don't forget, there was a Salem-powered death squad just hunting huntsmen that probably graduated from there.
And also, by the way, I must point out the fact that the way they edited this episode to show more action, we hear Nora's terrible "why is it always something" line a second time later in the episode. That comes back. They replay that part. And again, it's not about that line specifically. It's about that, to me, shows that they are just trying to include more action, more fight for the sake of more, not for the sake of quality or for the sake of plot or storytelling or anything, because that means they're literally just replaying the same thing again. And why? Why else would you do that other than to just try to demonstrate that you are, look guys, here's your action. Here's your action. We fixed it. We fixed the problems, guys. Do you like us now? Please love us. Please suck our cocks. Like, that's what it feels like to me. And that bothers, because it's not that great of a fight. It's okay, but it reeks of desperation when I watched it this time. And if you don't get that impression, that's fine. Like, I'm not going to try to argue and say that, like, oh, you're an idiot for liking this fight scene. It's not one of the worst fight scenes ever, like, in terms of the actual choreography. There's some cool choreography that happens. I will admit that. But it just feels like, like D got jobbed really quickly. I think that's kind of lame. Again, it's just the huntsman being too pathetic. And I will give a compliment, like the train and its weapons look really cool. Like they're very like Art Deco kind of looking to me. And I just fucking love Art Deco. So
I wish we would have gotten a sequel to Grimm Eclipse so that we could play on this level.
Oh God,
it would make a cool level. It's like a creative idea. A train fight's a cool idea. It's just, I'm seeing the cracks even at the very beginning. They're very obvious cracks even from the beginning. So
yeah, well, I would say that dude has convinced me now to join his hater side media. You're going to have to do the exact same thing to try and convert me back. I'm afraid that I'm also extremely disloyal though, dude. So I will probably stab you in the back.
Please, dude. This is not even much. This is not even close to my strongest argument. Just getting started.
Speaking of betrayal, we also got the scene where Adam kills the White Fang plot off and fumes about Blake. It's just really a shame that, as horrible as the White Fang plot was, and as glad as I am that they finally killed it off, it does feel wrong. And there's a lot about the White Fang plot in Adam in this volume specifically, and I'll address those as we cross those bridges. They're not necessarily problems, but it still feels wrong. Like, it feels wrong that the White Fang plot was dropped before they reached the kingdom that is most responsible for the Faunus racism that has been built up as, like, the arch enemy of the Faunus the entire series, but then the plot just doesn't make it there.
I thought we already went over this. That's just like propaganda.
I don't know. Weiss in a very early volume states that she had a bunch of her co-workers and stuff killed off by White Fang terror cell attacks. So I would assume that it had something to do there. But when we do get there, yeah, there's no White Fang cells. I'm not even certain why they wouldn't just sort of splinter off and do their own thing. Even like if that's the case, like
that was the biggest problem with the White Fang is like they're almost too big for their own good. There's just a bunch of like strays and there's no order.
I'll just rattle some stuff off. The whole plot line was introduced in the Black trailer where they are robbing a train full of Schnee dust. Then they are protesting like unfair work conditions, particularly in Atlas. Ilya's entire backstory is that she attended an Atlas Academy, and not Atlas Academy itself, but like an academy in Atlas, and her parents died in an Atlas mine, presumably a Schnee dust mine. Adam has a SDC brand on his face. We'll get to that because I have a very big problem with how wrong that feels with the way it was executed when we get there. But it's all going to show that even though it's not a mistake to just kill this plot off, because it was a half-baked, malformed plot to begin with, so it's best to just throw it over the cliff like one of the gremlin babies from 300. But it still feels wrong. It still feels like a massive missed opportunity. And it is incredible that this show managed to pull off that specific feeling. Like, God, I hate this, but I wish there was more. Even though I know if there was more, I would hate it more because they suck at their job.
Well, I know exactly what it would be, too. It would probably have just been that Robin and her crew would have wound up being the White Fang guys. They probably would have just put masks on them and called it a day at that point.
God, you're probably right.
Yeah, I mean, they are like the rebels squadron up there in Atlas and stuff, so they, that's basically White Fang. You could just make them the Fang. Just give them all tails and stuff. Easy peasy. Done.
Make Robin a bird faunus.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really weird convention.
Okay, so another thing I wanted to point out that bothers me, and I've talked about this before, but it is relevant to this specific episode, is this does have the issue of Sun's reason for leaving Blake makes no goddamn sense whatsoever. I just want to remind everybody that that's still a thing.
Oh, someone commented on the Volume 4 podcast that it would have made more sense if the reason he left is because Blake was treating him like shit, and he was just sick and tired of her. I had to heart that comment because that made me chuckle.
Yeah, no, whoever said that, you are correct, sir, and or madam, and or neither. You are absolutely correct, based. And like as media has said, there is no heterosexual explanation for why Sun was with Blake for volumes 4 and 5. It just doesn't exist. So yes, to that commenter, you are correct that it would have made more sense for him to just be fed up with her, but that's not what they tell us. He just gives this really non-committal answer, which makes no sense because Sun is he seems like a very committed guy, to be honest, based off of what we just saw from volumes 4 and 5. Like, he seems to care more about the opposite sex than he cares about his own teammates. So that makes no sense whatsoever. And then Neptune lampshading it. I hate RWBY really has a problem as a show with lampshading shit. It really bothers me because Neptune then lampshades it by saying, Neptune just says, it just feels like you're letting her go. You fucking think? Yeah, that is what's going on. Like, what the fuck? And Blake does deserve more consequences, which is funny that other commenter said something because I said, why is Sun not more pissed at her? And also, very importantly, throughout this entire volume, which I may forget to mention this after this, why is Yang not more pissed at Blake? That is a massive, undeniable issue with this volume. And again, I say this as a Bumblebee shipper, Yang should not have forgiven Blake so quickly, or at least not off screen. Blake absolutely betrayed Yang and her entire team, and she faces zero fucking consequences for all that shit. And you know what? I can't even blame Blake for that. Because, I talked about this before, and I re-listened to our Volume 4 podcast, and I talked about this. Characters doing bad things can be a very good thing for them if they face consequences and have to apologize and make up for their bad actions, right? That's what makes Zuko one of the best characters of all time. That's a positive thing. But the problem is Blake does bad things, and then the writers act like she's never doing anything wrong. And that is the major, major fucking issue, is that she betrays Yang, she leaves her team and doesn't really even apologize for it or face any consequences for it. It's just kind of brushed under the rug, regardless of even the romantic implications for Blake and Yang. That needed to be addressed more, and it doesn't get addressed in this volume. So I'm just going to mention it now that doesn't get addressed.
And also, in that hypothetical, Weiss, I think, did her part in Volume 5 to talk Yang down, and I think that actually does help smooth this plot over. I don't actually have that much of a problem with Yang kind of bottling up her resentment. I do wish it was maybe a little bit more there and that they had more of an opportunity to actually talk about it rather than just letting it all fall as water under the bridge. But I do not hate that Yang kind of just is whatever about it because of the conversation she had with Weiss and trying to understand Blake and trying to let this heal at its own pace. That's fine. I do wish that this conversation happened at some point in this volume. Not necessarily for Blake or Yang, but because we never really get RWBY's opinion on this. And I keep making these jokes that Blake and RWBY aren't really friends. This is actually one of the reasons why I keep making jokes about RWBY and Blake not actually being friends. RWBY never really has any kind of reaction or any kind of conversation about Blake leaving her. We get Yang and Weiss talking about that, and yes, throughout the first 3 volumes, Weiss and Yang are much closer to Blake than RWBY is. That's obvious. That's apparent. But RWBY's supposed to be the leader. This is a missed opportunity. This is another thing that's not necessarily a complaint, but it feels wrong that it didn't happen? Why isn't there a moment where RWBY gets to step up and be the leader of her team? There's moments where, like, she's the paragon of virtue. She kicks all kinds of ass throughout this volume. She's one of the best parts of this volume again. Certainly way more than she was in Volume 5. Like, this is RWBY Volume 4 levels of Ruby Rose we're approaching here, but she never really gets an opportunity to be the mediator between Yang and Blake, or Blake and Weiss. It still feels like she has a much deeper connection to Jean, Ren, and Nora, despite Jean, Ren, and Nora not being there for half the volume.
Yeah, I would say that trying to maintain team cohesion is a pretty important thing for a leader to do. So yeah, it's like you said, I hadn't thought about it before you said that, but it does make sense that you would maybe want her to step in some way. And I would say I'm sort of with you on like the Weiss and Yang side of the equation. I'm kind of fine with that. I do wish Blake had like tried to apologize at some point. Like, if anyone was to bring it up, I would have thought it would have been the girl who just came back, that she herself, having realized that leaving them was a bad idea and has now come back to them, would have said something.
Blake could have literally just like written a couple letters and be like, hey, sorry, I need to like go back home and make sure my family's safe and stuff. And
I'm talking about like when she comes back though. Like,
oh yeah,
when she came back, seems to me like a natural thing for her to do would have been to bring it up. The fact that she didn't and nobody else did is, I would say, kind of weird. I think it might be, like you said, with the whole them just kind of wanting to like jump right into the action in this volume. That might have something to do with it. So they didn't really want to bother kind of cleaning up a bunch of stuff from Volume 5 too early, and might have just swept a bunch of it under the rug because of that, because they wanted it to not be so boring this time, maybe. That's the only thing I can think of as to why Blake wouldn't have tried to make some form of amends.
I have a few more notes on this. As far as the lampshading goes, RWBY's first line is literally, "What's with the standing?" Obvious pot shot at Volume 5. There's a bit in here where she has presents for the gang, and it never reveals that. That is a leftover from a scrapped plot point, which was that it was supposed to be friendship bracelets, and the friendship bracelets were originally what was going to trigger RWBY's Silver Eye powers.
I'm kind of glad they got rid of that.
Yeah, I don't know how Maria factors into that, because they definitely already had Maria planned, but I don't know like how that would have went down. I'm a little curious whether it would have actually been worse.
Speaking of stuff that was scrapped, apparently there was a beach episode. Not in this volume, but back in like volumes 1 through 3, there's supposed to be a beach episode. And there's a bunch of art that dropped recently of like, oh, here's the concept art of like everyone in bathing suits.
Yeah, it's all very cute. RWBY doesn't need a beach episode. The budget's already stretched a little thin, but hey, Viz, you guys make comics. How about a fun slice of life RWBY beach episode one-shot? Can ya give us something like that? Because that would be really cool and would sell like hotcakes. Viz just dropping the ball. The last thing that they announced was fucking Gamer Supps bullshit. I have other notes on this volume. I have no fucking idea how Weiss's glyphs work. Like, she's able to hover on them, but also, like, fly on them because she's hovering above the train, but somehow keeping pace with the train.
Shut up, don't ask questions.
Wait, hold
Shut
on.
up, don't ask questions.
What are the
Shut up,
physics
don't
there?
ask questions.
Wait, hold up. We've seen her use glyphs on a train before, and they kept pace with the train while it was in motion.
Well, no, when the glyphs are attached to the train, yes, or when they're attached to the airship, but they're hovering, like, off of the train when she's facing down the Sphinx.
I'm talking about the train fight in Volume 2, dude. She was inside of a train. She put a glyph up in the air. Shouldn't that glyph...
Oh my god, you're right.
Yeah.
I don't know how Weiss's glyphs work. All these years later, I still don't understand the physics behind them, or...
I don't think Weiss knows.
Yeah, she just does it. It just happens.
I would say that just glyphs probably just maintain the same momentum as whatever Weiss had at the moment she formed one is probably the answer.
It's okay, yeah, I can see that.
She creates a domain around her.
Could be, yeah.
The action is fun. I do like it. Maria is very obvious. They focus on her, I think, twice in this episode before her initial introduction. The fact that the relic attracts the Grimm is something that they probably should have been privy to before getting on the train. Not that it would change their course of action, but maybe they could have, like, done something to stay ready for the inevitable Grimm attack. Not that that really matters because it never really comes up again. It's never a factor. In fact, later on in the volume, they act as if that's not the case. I don't think it's really a necessary plot point because if the Grimm are supposed to be this ever-present threat, just have them be a threat.
You're right, but we know they don't make the Grimm a consistent threat, and they rarely do even feel like a threat. So yes, I mean, I agree with you.
That was a very old critique of the Grimm for a very long time, though, at that point. And it might have gone a little bit too hard. Like, there were some occasions when the Grimm were somewhat threatening in previous volumes. If we are to take the theory that was propounded on earlier and say that this volume was sort of a response to fan critique, I'm not certain it was just critique of Volume 5. I think it might have been a greater amount of it, if that is the case. A lot of stuff that had already compounded over the years. They might have been trying to do something about that, but they also, each one kind of also brought in some other stuff because, like, in order to make the Grimm the threat this time, they decided to make other huntsmen really bad at their job, even though they're professionals.
Which I complained about in a previous fucking podcast.
Yeah.
Is this the standard?
I've been complaining about it since this channel fucking started.
Which could also be thought of to have been a problem even in Volume 5, too. So this might actually work against that theory some, because in Volume 5, all of the huntsmen that Crow was trying to get were dead because they had been killed off by Grimm, supposedly.
Or Tyrion and Hazel. The thing is, like, Volume 5 had the fewest amount of Grimm encounters. Like, there's just Weiss versus the Lancers, and that's it. Whereas this, I think it has the most Grimm encounters, because we have the whole train sequence, then we have all the stuff with the apathy, then we have the finale with the Leviathan, and so I feel like the Grimm are a much more persistent threat in this volume than they ever really have been. So yes, I think it is, like you were saying, Coop, where it might be addressing a problem with the entire series, but it also still feels like Volume 5 in particular is what they had in mind when they were writing these Grimm sequences.
Yeah, that could also be it. Like I said, I could go either way with. I don't know. The inner machinations of the writing staff of RWBY's mind is an enigma. Cue Falling Milk.
Team RWBY and Team Juniper separate. We get a pretty baller use of Jean and Rin's ability, which is so fucking busted, and they do it all the time. I can't even complain about, oh, why don't they just do this more often? Like, no, they actually do it pretty much every time they can post Jean unlocking his semblance. Like, they fucking spam that shit in Volume 8.
It's a good ability.
Yeah, it is just a broken combo. The aura amplification and then the Grimm nullification. So they do that to get all the people away from the relic, and so that the rest of the plot can happen. Then turns out that Maria stowed away with Team RWBY for reasons that are actually never explained, because she didn't know RWBY had silver eyes yet.
She was just there for the
She's
reasons. It's just convenient. Honestly, that's part of the problem.
She's a semi-senile old woman, guys. She got lost. Let's not beat her up too bad, okay?
I'm not going to complain about that too much. Like, that kind of plot convenience is one of the kind of things I can sort of overlook, to be honest. I have much bigger issues with this volume than that. So, it's not that big of a deal to me.
Hey, you leave my gal Marie Calavera alone. She's a cool grandma, okay?
She's kind of the breakaway character from this volume. Like, I do love her a lot, but at the same time, it's like, I get why you're here from, like, a writing standpoint, but why are you here from a character standpoint? Why did you turn around like that? I mean, I don't really care because it's not all that important. She could just be like, oh, whatever. I felt like I saw you kids and thought you could use my guidance since I'm more familiar with this area. I think that was the reason that Raymond came up with for fixing RWBY Volume 6. In fixing RWBY, I think Raymond didn't even have Maria on the train. I think she was already, like, doing a scouting mission thing and then ran into the Team RWBY group after the train wrecked.
I mean, like, the whole thing with her is about the silver eyes. Couldn't you have just said that she has, like, a sixth sense and sensed that RWBY had them and kind of followed her off of that?
I mean, you could, but that's not an explanation that they give. But you could have done that.
I feel like that would be a fine thing.
The silver eyes work in mysterious ways.
that they haven't explained yet, so they can do whatever they want with them. So
I don't know if the mic picked it up, but I ripped ass right after I said that.
Yeah, like who knows? Like Ruby could Silver Eye blast Salem and like cure her of her Grimm poisoning or whatever. I don't like fuck. Who knows?
It wouldn't cure her of her immortality, but yes. So moving on to episode 2, Uncovered, which is an episode that I had a lot of praise for when it came out. I even did a whole special video on it. It is a very well-directed episode, but it starts off with presumably a flashback or something that happened way earlier, which is Cinder's not dead. Shocker of shockers, I know.
Who could have guessed?
Who could have guessed that someone didn't die from falling into a black void? You know, the one thing that has never killed anyone in fiction ever. People legit thought she was dead and bitched about her still being alive. Like, yeah, I hate her too, but come on, guys, be reasonable.
she got a little banged up, but
That's whenever you point at the media literacy sign.
Straight up kills this bitch and takes her wardrobe and her life savings. Cinder's such a fucking horrible person. I love it. Also, the chamber to the Spring Maiden Vault conveniently has, like, a cave entrance. Well, not a cave entrance. She does kind of, like, bust it down, but that shit was gonna open up in the next, like, earthquake or something anyway. Like, she doesn't try very hard to open up that entrance.
This episode is where I had to introduce a whole new system for this volume, which was I gave it 1 rating for how it was just in the context of the volume, and then I had to give it a separate rating for how the episode was in the context of the entire series, especially the stuff that comes afterwards. And this episode, I gave it an 85, so an 8.5 out of 10, just in the context of this volume. But I gave it a 4 out of 10 in the context of the entire show. The reason for this is there are some good things here. Oscar makes me almost like him for a second when he actually fights back against Ozpin, which, as I've said before, I want to like Oscar. I want to root for him. I want to be okay with Rose Garden because then I won't have to be angry if that happens, you know? The problem is he only does this here and then he never does it again. And that's a big problem. Again, I'm not even blaming Oscar for this. This is the writers. Like, if this had been the start of a change in Oscar. Now, obviously, would things have been better even here if we had known his motivations from the beginning and we had understood why he even came on this journey in the first place, why he accepted Ozpin's call? Yes, of course. And that's not a difficult thing to do. It's really embarrassing that the writers never gave us this. But even if they backtracked and they kind of retroactively, you know, they retconned it here and gave the motivations here, and that was part of this thing where he starts fighting back against this version of Ozpin, saying, you know, maybe something like, hey, this is not what I signed up for. You're not doing the things that you said that we were going to do. And then maybe we could get a flashback to seeing him talk about the things that he initially wanted to do or the reasons why he initially signed up for this, you know, dangerous task, right? That would be great. And if he kept this up, if this was like the start of him fighting back against Ozpin and Ozpin kind of became like a secondary antagonist, I think that would have been much better and I would have really liked this. But the problem is that that's not what happens and that this is just a one-off. Like the example I always use, and I'll bring this up in the volume that we talk about it, it's volume 8, after the gang kind of has this huge triumphant moment of saving Penny from the virus thing, at least temporarily. They save her from the virus and they're all like, you know, so relieved and they all helped out and even Emerald helped out and she gives this nice sweet little speech that tells them how far they've come and that actually works. And then fucking Oscar walks up and is like, hello everyone, I think Ozpin would like to say something to you. Fuck off. Like, why did he do this? And then Ozpin doesn't actually do anything better besides one tiny little thing that happens later in this volume, which really doesn't count. It really means nothing. That shouldn't have even happened in the first place. That was also bad writing. I'm going to complain about that when we get to that in the last episode or 2 of this volume. Thing that Ozpin does that supposedly seems to be the one thing that redeems him to the entire fucking cast.
Even though it absolutely fucking doesn't. It's his own self-preservation. Like, come on, guys.
yeah.
Exactly. It's fucking idiotic and terrible, and I'll complain about when we get there. So that's my point. Is like, I was so excited for this in the moment. And that's probably why, my thoughts on this volume, partly why my thoughts on this volume were more positive in the past, because yeah, Ozpin fighting back against Oscar and telling everybody, hey, he's hiding something, like, oh wow, he's hiding something. Oscar is helping the actual heroes. He's helping the main characters, not fucking Ozpin, who's a fucking piece of shit. And then that never happens again. And the thing that he's hiding is a fucking horrific backstory that helps make the show much worse. In the context of the series, Oscar fighting back here means absolutely nothing. And I hate that it does, because it was one of those things like, oh my god, I might be able to like Oscar now. And it's like, no, you actually can't. He's only cool for like 5 seconds, and then he's a total bitch again. And he doesn't fight back against Ozpin ever again. It's like, guys, you knew that was the right thing to do, because they did it here. That's the thing that's the worst part, is they knew that that's the right thing to do. They knew that was better for Oscar to do. And they do it for a little bit, and then they don't do it again. And then it's just like, oh, Ozpin's forgiven? What the fuck? It's really fucking infuriating to me. So that's why, like, in retrospect, this episode is not a good episode. It's good in the context if you think this is actually going to be a permanent change. And if it was a permanent change, it would have been a very good episode. But it's not. And all it gives us is terrible backstory. That's not a reward at all. This is, again, why my opinion on this volume has changed so much. One of the few cool things that happens in this volume means absolutely nothing.
We also get, like, more kind of boring stuff in the house, like, oh, see, we heard your guys' complaints, so we're gonna start on action in the first episode, and then flashback to them in the train sequence, and then the next episode we're gonna bring it back to that fucking Volume 5 house. Totally not even really learning the lesson, and just explaining stuff that they could have said either at the train station or just not even really needed to explain. Like, okay, we need to get to Atlas. The only way to get to Atlas is to first go to Argus. That's really all you needed. You didn't really need this scene. But I love Weiss. I don't think you guys appreciate the character arc I went through in Volume 4. I think you guys are kind of taking me for granted. Like, I'm looking at a scene right now and everyone just has this neutral expression. Except Weiss looks so fucking done with this shit already. Like, she just got back.
Weiss, being the most reasonable and smart person in the room, counter just went up again.
Weiss doesn't get a whole lot of, like, plot stuff to do in this volume, but every moment of her in this volume is just so fun. She's such a fun character in this volume specifically, and just how something that we talked about with the Volume 1 retrospective, which is that she is the most, like, cold, logical person in the crew, and she is just not okay with any of this bullshit.
If I was to say, like, one thing about, like, the house thing, it's that if, like you said, the explanation was all that brief, they could have interwoven it into the fight scene. You could have had them basically explain what it was they were doing on the train. Yeah, like Argus Limited, the episode was fine to follow, even though they repeated stuff with the action sequence. Like, you can still follow along with what they were doing and why. You didn't need the extra explanation. It is fine as it is. If you wanted to be like, make sure you pounded it into the head, you could just be like, we gotta stop these guys before they derail our trip to Argus. That trip to Argus that we're doing on this train so that we can get to Atlas. Yeah, we'll never make it to Atlas like this. These are very simple, punchy lines that you could have thrown in anywhere.
So yes, Ozpin tries to explain himself, and I think, first of all, Aaron Dismuke, great voice actor. He is excellent in this episode. The explanation Ozpin gives for why he keeps secrets, I think, is fair. It doesn't explain his actions, because it's another one of those things where, like, okay, you have all this experience. Salem has a pattern behavior of taking your closest subordinates, revealing the truth to them, and using that truth to turn them against you. Maybe you should respond to that by getting ahead of this. Kind of like Eminem does at the end of 8 Mile, where he just dunks on himself for 2.5 minutes to where fucking the Falcon can't say shit.
His real name's Clarence.
Clarence's parents have a real good marriage. That dude's Captain America now, technically. In name only. You've been around for God knows how long, and you haven't learned anything in that experience. You're not any closer to achieving your goal, and you're not even being honest about this endless game of whack-a-mole. Like, I think if Ozpin came out and said, like, yes, Salem is immortal, but, it's no different from how the Grimm are an ever-present threat. We just gotta keep knocking her down when she gets back up. That would be fine, because the Huntsmen are already kind of signing into this with the knowledge that this is a job that doesn't can't end. Like, there is never the possibility, or at least it's never spoken about, the possibility that the Grimm threat can be dealt with once and for all. So why is Salem any different?
I guess that kind of makes sense.
The real problem, and this is actually revealed at the end of the Lost Fable episode, but I'm gonna come out and say it. The real problem is that Ozpin doesn't even have a plan for what to do right now. And that's the thing that everyone is upset about. They're not upset about Salem being immortal or Ozpin being complacent in Salem's rise to power. No, they're like, why the fuck are we going to Atlas then? You don't have a plan. What are we gonna do when we get there?
We assumed you had a plan!
Yeah, we went on this whole damn foolish idealistic crusade under the assumption that, like, there was an end goal to this plan.
They probably should have asked him about the plan earlier on them. I would kind of put it to them for not having figured out that earlier. Me personally, if I was going to go on some sort of world-spanning quest, I would probably ask why I was doing it fairly early on.
Like, that's a lot of frequent flyer miles. I don't know about all this.
I love that RWBY calls him out on his bullshit, on his hypocrisy. So the whole believing in humanity thing, that was just for everyone else. Like, ooh, that stings. Especially coming from her, who's been kind of just gung-ho. Like, RWBY is the most okay with the idea of spending the rest of her life on a battlefield and dying out in the wilderness somewhere. So the fact that it's coming from her means that Ozpin really fucked up. Like, this isn't coming from Weiss, who has aspirations beyond just being a huntress. This isn't coming from Blake, who has aspirations about, like, racial equality, or Yang, who's just kind of in it for shits and giggles, allegedly. Like, this is coming from the one person who's like, yeah, I'm gonna die a hero.
And that's one of the other things that pisses me off is, I didn't mention this earlier, is it's not just the fact that Oscar doesn't continue to fight back against Ozpin. It's the fact that they all don't continue to fight back against Ozpin. The fact that much less everyone, forgives him or forgets about all this, and then they just go back to listening to him, and not only listening to him, like basically just being his bitches, like being his lackeys.
Particularly Yang. Crow, I understand, because Crow never actually gets an opportunity. Crow never knows that Ozpin comes back.
You know, Crow can suck Clover's dick. I don't care.
Crow is the one who is, like, the most hurt by this revelation, and Crow has the most reason to hate Ozpin, but Crow never gets an opportunity to forgive Ozpin because Ozpin comes back at the end of Volume 7, which is also when Crow gets arrested, and then Crow is completely separated from the rest of the cast the entirety of Volume 8. Crow doesn't actually know that Ozpin is talking with Oscar again until, like, after Volume 8.
Crow's character died in a much needed talk in Volume 4. Crow was dead after that. I did not give a shit about Crow after that, so I don't care about him. He should not be one of the leaders. Like, again, I'm talking about the main characters, Team RWBY and Team Junior, basically. Why do they go back to listening to Ozpin? That is so fucking infuriating because, again, the writers even show in this episode that they should not be listening to Ozpin. And then they just go back to having them listen to Ozpin, and he just goes back to leading them by the nose, and they just become, you know, complacent, and like they just have lobotomies basically and just do whatever he says.
Like, I can understand RWBY deferring to Ozpin, especially like throughout Volume 7. She puts herself in the position that Ozpin was in pre, like, Volume 3, so she gets a lot more empathy for the choices Ozpin had to make. So it makes sense if she were to, like, okay, let's just hear Ozpin out. Again, it could have been a moment where she's like, no, knock it off. We don't need to be fighting Ozpin right now. Let's hear what he has to say and then take it under consideration.
Yeah, and then that's a point of conflict, and they call it out, and it's a point of conflict, and the others disagree with her.
Sort of like what she does with Ironwood in that same volume.
That would have been interesting, but that's not what happens.
Yeah, I know.
I think it's what happens.
We also get Cinder confronting Little Miss Malachite. I just want to point out the wanted posters with the people responsible for the battle at Haven Academy. They have pictures of everyone, including a never-before-seen picture of Hazel pre-beard, but the pictures they chose to use are 100% from the fucking wiki. Picture they used for Cinder is from Volume 2, Episode 1, when she is like, or what, Roman? The picture of Emerald, it's a little blurry, but I'm pretty sure it's from that same episode. It's when she pickpockets Roman's lighter. The picture for Mercury is when he's fighting Yang, and Yang initiates her semblance, and that's what the explosion is, and then the picture of Adam, even though it's cut off, I know that fucking frame. It's from when he's saying, "Hello, my darling." That's the shot that they use. Who took these pictures?
These are the pictures taken by those, like, news gulls or whatever from One Piece. Like, where are you coming from?
So, Little Miss Malachite, she's a fun character. Her accent is
Lovely.
cartoonish.
She's something of some sort.
A fun little reference. We always get these fairy tale and nursery rhyme allusions, but it so rarely does anything other than just being a reference. Little Miss Malachite running the Spider Gang and being all informative is one of those things where it's just like, I don't know what the thought process was there, and that amuses me. Like, I am amused by the leap in logic it took to make this character what she is.
I'm amused that she's fat.
That too.
I was more like, when I first saw her, I was like, oh, I'll go, because like she's like, oh, are Melanie and Militia about to come out back in the story? No.
Oh, that would have been nice.
Her little henchwoman, though, is really cute. I mean, they're all wearing purple, but the one with the long brown hair, she looks really cute.
Yep, very, very.
Underrated background character. She's the one who points out the fact that they already know where Team RWBY is heading because the big guy came to them, and that comes into play later this volume. It turns out that Hazel wanted to keep tabs on where Osmond and the others were heading, so he went to Miss Malachite as well and found out that they were boarding the Argus Limited, and so they already know where these people are, but they're keeping it to themselves until they find out if anybody is hunting Cinder, which there are, and that leads to something later on in this volume that we'll get to. But then, yeah, we cut back to them summoning Jen. Man, Jen's design.
Yeah, that's all you gotta say.
She's also fat. In a good way, though.
With a PH.
She's thick with a few C's.
Fat ass titties, then. I'm sorry.
I love when Crow tries to, like, be the voice of reason and get between Team RWBY and Osmond, and Weiss just fucking is not about that. Everyone kind of, like, clinches up and, like, you know, Yang balls her fist, Blake reaches for her sword. Weiss draws her sword and points it right at Crow's throat. Like, RWBY is officially out of the trial period of her friendship with Weiss. Weiss is now ride or die for fucking RWBY. You love to see it. You love to see the upgrade here, and it makes sense that the upgrade happened at this point. Even though I've been joking, it's a joke, guys. RWBY wasn't actually on a trial period. That's not how friendships work.
No, we're sticking with it.
But it is a swing character for Weiss to draw up a contract like that and
Oh, it would be, yeah.
be like, okay, you got 1 year to actually, like, prove yourself as my friend, and then you'll be my friend for realsies.
That's the way Weiss would think about it, but as soon as she thinks about that, that means Ruby's already her friend.
RWBY and Weiss just have a lot of cute interactions. But yeah, and then Jin leads us into the worst episode of the volume.
Yeah.
DOS flashback.
Yeah.
Yep.
The flashback to the beginning of time.
I think flashbacks in general in RWBY don't have a good track record of being necessary.
A lot of flashbacks in general don't have a good track record, but yeah, especially in RWBY. Now, I will admit that this episode is not as bad as the worst episodes from Volumes 5 or Volume 4.
Yes. Okay. We are in agreement on that because I was going to be like, okay, here's my thing and I'm going to use a much needed talk. Like, this is not a much needed talk, okay? So, first of all, presentation. This looks gorgeous. This is a very well animated episode. The production of Volume 6 is just a massive step up from what Volumes 4 and 5 were doing. I think that is a big reason why so many people are more okay with defending this because, in all honesty, I think this is probably the best or at least most consistent the show has looked. Volume 7 and 8 have a lot of, like, improvements within the details, but so much of Volume 7 and 8 looks the same because it takes place in the same, like, 3 little areas, whereas Volume 6, it's a journey. Like, we get several different locations throughout Volume 6. We also got a lot of locations in Volume 4, but they were still learning the Maya engine, and so every stretch of wilderness was actually the same stretch of wilderness, just from a different angle, you know, trying to hide the fact that it was a carbon copy. I'm pretty sure Kuro Yuri and Oni Yuri reused a lot of the same assets to save on time, you know, whereas Volume 6, it's a lot more distinct. It's a lot more colorful than Volume 7 and 8. It's not as colorful as Volume 9, obviously, but Volume 9 kind of pushed it into gaudiness territory, especially early on. So I do think that art style wise and just location design wise, maybe it's the snow, maybe it's because of how much snow is in this volume, helps it out a lot, but I just find this very appealing, and I find this episode very visually appealing, and no, I'm not just saying that because Salem is fucking hot.
That's what I would go with, honestly.
I like the snow too, actually.
And you know what? Ozma, not a bad looking dude.
That's true. But okay, here's the thing. This is still crap. It's still really, really bad. The reason to me why I don't have this as bad as the worst episode in some of the previous volumes, I'm trying to think like, it's worse than any episode in Volume 3. It's worse than any episode in Volume 2. But they're one episode each in Volumes 1, 4, and 5 that I have rated worse than this.
There's a couple episodes in Volume 5 I would have lower than this.
Oh, I do have 2, actually. 3. Shit, I have 3 that are... God, Volume 5 is so bad. Okay, so yeah, I actually had 3 episodes in Volume 5 that are worse than this, you are. But still, this is very bad. So the stuff that I like. 1, I don't mind the idea of turning a supposedly classic love story into a tragedy with Salem and Ozpin. I don't mind that idea at all. The problem isn't really the Ozpin and Salem shit necessarily. It's the god shit that really fucks it up. And it's putting their love story into the context of the wider world that also makes it worse too. Like, I don't mind a tragedy, a tragic love story between two people and they end up becoming enemies, but that being the simplistic explanation for why they are basically at war with each other doesn't really work. And it would have worked better if the idea was that Ozpin is also like a problem and he is not the good guy. If it was just them being petty assholes, which is basically what's going on here, is it is a lot of it is them being petty assholes, then that's fine if Ozpin is also considered a problem, but the writers clearly don't consider Ozpin to be as bad as Salem. And after watching this and everything else that's happened, I personally consider Ozpin to be nearly as bad as Salem. I really don't think he's that much better than her. Oh, yes, is he better? Yes, because he doesn't want to kill everybody. But is he willing to sacrifice people? Yes. Does he listen to people? No. Is he very selfish? Yes. Like, is he doing this partly just to get revenge on his ex? Yes. I mean, like, he's still a piece of shit. And that would be fine if the writers in the show acknowledge that, but they do not. And that's where this becomes a problem. Also, one of the other issues is just the fact that we don't need to explain the magic. I've explained this many, many times, and I talk about this a lot, so I'll try to be quick. It's a positive thing for Harry Potter. One of the best things about Harry Potter is that they never explain the origin of magic. Because if they did, then it would really be trash. Like Avatar, The Last Airbender, this is the example I often use, is like the origin of Avatar Wan, or whatever his name is, whatever, the first Avatar. That was shit. It was fucking stupid. It was unnecessary, and it ruins the mystique and the magic of the show. It was part of Korra, which was an absolutely garbage tier TV series. I don't care what anybody says. It's fucking garbage. Fucking awful. We don't need to know exactly why this shit is happening. These aren't the main characters. Who cares? Why are you wasting time giving us backstory for these already bad characters, Salem and Ozpin, when you could be spending more time building up the main characters that we're supposed to be caring about? Because you do give us this backstory, and it doesn't really help anything with those main characters. It certainly doesn't make Ozpin any more sympathetic. In fact, one of the problems I have with this is it makes him less sympathetic because he collaborated more with Salem than I think almost any of us would have expected initially. And so that makes him look worse. It makes me feel a little more sympathetic for Salem, but is that really the goal you wanted? You wanted me to feel bad for Salem? Because like, this is all really fucking stupid. And the gods are really fucking bad. Like, none of this makes sense. Like, I've made this joke before. Like, the gods in RWBY are trying to make people atheists because they are pieces of shit, man. Like, they punish her way too hard. She didn't even really do anything that bad. And even if she did, shouldn't we as the audience be meant to hate the gods more than her because they're like the all-powerful force that is just like overly judging a human for just wanting love? Like, I'm sorry, I am not going to be more sympathetic to the gods here. I am absolutely going to be more sympathetic to the human here that is heartbroken and desperately searching for love. Yes, she might do bad things to try to regain her lost love, but that just means she really fucking loved him and she's really committed. Like, I'm sorry, that's like cool points to her. That makes me like Salem more. Yeah, you go, girl, get him back. Like, fuck yeah, I wish I had somebody that committed to me. Fuck yeah. Why would I hate on her instead of hating on the gods? Like, the gods just seem like petty assholes. If the Bible was written this poorly, everyone would be a Muslim or an atheist at this point, because the gods calling this world an experiment.
It's such a fucking Reddit atheist thing to say, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that, again, makes them seem like petty assholes. Like, yeah, I know Noah's Ark and all that shit, but the Bible wasn't written as literal. I'm sorry, biblical literalists, you are incorrect. The Jews who wrote the Bible, the original, the Old Testament, did not intend any of that to be literal. Sorry to break it to you if you're a biblical literalist. You are factually incorrect.
So here's the thing about religion in mythology and why so many, like, RWBY is not alone in this, in how fake so many fantasy mythologies and fantasy religions feel, because they're all written from a perspective that doesn't actually understand the purpose that religion has within a society. Like, these gods do not act like gods. They're just super powerful dickheads. The reason why the Greek gods were characterized as dickheads is because nature is chaotic. The Greek gods were personifications of nature. The reason why Zeus was a dickhead was because sometimes people just get struck by lightning. The reason Poseidon was a dickhead is because sometimes storms just hit the seas and destroy your ships. Because sometimes life sucks and it's easier to personify that suckiness as a god than to deal with just the fact that nature is chaotic. Same thing with the Bible. Like, even modern religions that people still adhere to, that even people on this very podcast adhere to, myself included, that, like, the flood feels like a piece of mythology or like a piece of an allegory that was left over from a much older culture than the culture that wrote it, because it doesn't feel in character for God, because it's not written from a character perspective. It's written from this is a natural disaster, so of course God had something to do with it. That's kind of what the flood is based on. It's the same thing with all flood myths. Like, there's a reason why every culture has a flood myth. Now, you can either attribute that reasoning as, okay, a global flood really did happen, or civilization-wide flood really did happen, and these are all just different interpretations of that same event, or it's because civilizations were built on riverbeds, and rivers are prone to flooding, and flooding in a nascent civilization that hasn't accounted for flooding yet could potentially be wiped out by flooding.
I don't know, man. Those Nephilim needed to die.
They're used to certain size floods, but then an overly large flood happens that they're not prepared for, and that's what wipes them out.
Like, I'm not going to have the whole philosophical or biblical debate about, like, how much of the Bible should be allegorical, how much of it is historical, how much of it is neither, blah, 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 blah. The point is that this episode, The Lost Fable from RWBY Volume 6, Episode 3, sucks because it's not written within the same kind of, like, purpose. Like, what is the religion on Remnant? They're kind of too cowardly to even have analogs to that. Like, there's a lot of cross imagery on some characters. So is there, like, a RWBY equivalent of Jesus? Obviously not Jesus of Nazareth himself, because Nazareth doesn't exist, but fucking they make Richard Nixon quotes in Volume 2, so...
Yeah, they did do that.
There's obviously a RWBY equivalent to Richard Nixon. Why wouldn't there be a RWBY equivalent of Muhammad or the Buddha or Jesus or Moses? Now, it doesn't have to be exactly the same, just like how even something that takes place in something much more resembling the real world, I'm going to use JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in this, because JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has, like, actually literally Japan, actually literally Germany, America, Italy, etc., and there is also, like, a JoJo Jesus, but he's not, like, the same Jesus that we know in our world, because our world is not the same world as the JoJo's universe. But there is that analog there.
The gods here are very frustrating because they have neither the brains nor restraint of the God of Abraham, nor the interesting personality of the Greek gods.
And they also don't fit in with the whole, like, aspect of nature, because gods are, at the end of the day, a personification of the natural order of the universe. Whether you're a creationist or you think that's just how the world is, just naturally, whatever, God always exists in the gaps of our understanding. There's always the talk about, like, the God particle or whatever reference you want to use. But here it's just that they're really powerful people who can, like, make things and do things. and they have like some level of personality, but that's not what a deity is. That's not how religions are written. Even if within the context of something like the Odyssey, like even though the Odyssey has characterizations for the gods and does treat the gods as very much like just superpowered assholes, they're still superpowered assholes who are characterized in the same way as the thing that they are the god of. Like Ares is a violent asshole because war is inherently violent. I could go on and on about that, but the same thing with, any other god in any other mythology.
These gods are very non-committal, and another thing that bothers me is like, you do this thing to explain this much of the backstory and lore that we really didn't need, and then you don't explain the Grimm. So you do all that, but you don't actually explain the Grimm, and you don't actually explain the Silver Eyes. We see that the God of Light has the Silver Eyes, but you don't really explain that either. So why are you explaining some of like the backstory that we don't need, but then you're not explaining some of the other backstory that we don't need? Like, it just feels like they didn't know what they were doing the entire time.
I think the necessary things that we needed to know were where all the relics were at, maybe what the relics were and what they did, and why Salem could be beaten by the relics in some way, or why it is that we were gathering them, so that she couldn't have them at the very least. That would be probably what I would go with as the main things that needed to be explained. And I'm not certain that an entire backstory about all of that stuff was necessary for all of that. It probably could have been much shorter. You could have cut out a whole bunch of other stuff with it. And then in terms of like where Grimm and where the Silver Eyes came from, like, yes, you could have integrated it with that. I'm not certain that that was necessary at the time either. I was more concerned with what was going on in the plot that we were dealing with at the present. And so that sort of information was what I would say would be the more important stuff. And going into this extremely long-winded explanation of it is kind of tacking more stuff onto it. If it had just said something like, okay, yeah, the relics, each one of them contains a spirit, like the spirit you're talking to right now, who has a different power. Once all of the relics are gathered together, the world will explode or something. So
We don't exactly know, but it's not good. We should stop it.
Yeah. So best thing for you to do is gather some of them up or prevent Salem from getting her hands on them, which that's basically what we get out of it. But you could have very easily cut down a whole bunch of stuff out of that to say that, essentially. And if you wanted to also explain how the relics had come about, well, that's also a pretty easy one. You could have just said, hey, the gods that made the world, they made these relics, and each of them has some sort of stabilizing function on the world or something. Salem messed with them at one point, and that's how she got immortal or something. You could make a very brief explanation for all of it, I think. That would have served a similar purpose, and also could have been expounded upon later if you felt the need, I think. So I would say, yeah, having such a long diatribe about it was not really all that needed.
It's very unnecessary. I agree with what you said. You could have done a simpler version, like you said, if you were going to do this backstory in the first place, which I don't think was necessary in the first place. But if you're going to do it, a simpler version like you suggested, Coop, I think would have been better. And then they could, like you said, expound upon it later rather than just dumping this entire thing on us here, which is not
I think
well
it would
done.
have lent to their seeming motivation of also wanting to incorporate more action into this volume too, if they had just kept it briefer, because it would give them more space to play around with that sort of stuff.
Actually had interactions between Blake and Yang to build up to their relationship, which is something they were clearly trying to do.
You would get a lot more space to work with to do a lot more other things, I think, if it had just been a little bit brief.
It just goes back to every time RWBY lore dumps, this show lore dumps, it's always absolute trash. Every single fucking time, it is the worst aspect of the show. The more they explain the lore and the backstory of this universe, the worse it gets. The best the premise of the show is, the best the lore of the show is in the fucking red trailer. And then it just goes downhill from there, right? And maybe you could argue in volume 1, but you can't argue that it gets better as it goes on. It just gets worse. And this is just part of that. And this isn't even the worst one.
In fact, I'll save it for the next episode.
But am I wrong
I want
with
to hear
that?
it now. What is it you're trying to get at, Media? I kind of want to hear what you were going to say.
So, I think, and this is just my opinion, as bad as this episode is, as much as it is the worst episode of the volume by a mile, I think this is the best RWBY does at having an exposition dump.
Yeah. No, that's the sad thing is I think you're right.
And a lot of it hinges on the follow-up to this.
But that's how bad their exposition dumps are. If this is the best one, and I agree with you.
I do have a few other little points. Ozpin and Salem having kids, that's obviously like an allusion to the maidens, not whether they were the literal maidens, and they inherited Ozpin's body jumping abilities or not, or if that was something that Ozpin gave for other random girls in another lifetime afterwards, because they reminded him of his daughters. That's still kind of unclear.
Who cares?
It doesn't matter. There is one family, and I wonder if this is a scrapped plot point, where they look like they have dark skin like Maria and silver eyes, or silverish eyes. You can never really tell with this series because they give characters gray eyes all the time too. But that, when this episode came out, people were pointing that out like, okay, this is why Maria is either one of these kids or like Ozpin's grandkid from this lifetime, which could still be a thing. I don't actually wish this because Ozpin sucks, but it would be fun if we got more people who knew Ozpin in a previous lifetime, because everyone we know who has history with Ozpin other than Salem only knows him from his most recent lifetime. Like, Hazel only knows him as Ozpin. All of Salem's cronies only know him as Ozpin. All the headmasters only know him as Ozpin. It would be fun if Lionheart or one of the older people, like maybe Ironwood or Freya, the Winter Maiden, she's really old, maybe she knows him as Ozla, or whatever the fuck his name would have been before Ozpin.
Ozzy Osbourne, obviously. That's
Ozzy.
Ozymandias.
Like, that's a fun thing about Avatar. When you had Aang interact with these, like, really old people or, the spirits of the Avatar and stuff, and we got backstory where, like, it was kind of hard for Aang. This happens a lot more with Korra, because Korra is able to interact with Katara and Toph and people who knew Aang, like, personally knew Aang. That was fun. Aang didn't really get as many opportunities to do that throughout the series. He did it in flashbacks. Like, in flashbacks, he met people who knew Roku, and that was always fun. That was always a fun aspect of the Aang flashbacks from before he got frozen.
I don't necessarily know that that's that needed either, because Ozpin didn't really do all that much, even in this life, and presumably in his other ones. So having people who had met him before as, like, I'm not certain exactly what we would get out of that. I don't think. Might be a little bit funny.
Yeah, it would be fun. It would be amusing, even if it doesn't really contribute jack shit. And I'm only bringing this up because these kids do look kind of suspiciously like Maria. The revelation that Ozpin doesn't have a plan and that there is no beating Salem, which is something that Raven warned Yang about. Kind of implying that Raven somehow became privy to the same information. But I want to get into episode 4. So that's how it is. Because this is why this exposition dump doesn't bother me as much as a much needed talk or the opening salvo from volume 1, or even like a Ozpin speech about the color naming rule in volume 2. And that's because it actually impacts the story. Them seeing this happen is what causes division between them and Ozpin, and yes, that doesn't last super long, but it does happen. And it also leads to the character arc that is then influenced by the apathy in the coming episodes. Like, this actually matters. Like, it actually matters that Team RWBY now have to find their own reason for continuing on this journey to Atlas and continue watching over this relic, because they completely forget about the whole relic attracting Grimm thing after this.
That's true, they do.
But, I mean, that could have been the apathy's influence, because the only time where it's relevant is when they're under the influence of the apathy. That could be the apathy making them forget. We don't know how extensive the apathy's mental abilities are, but there's an excuse. But they also don't really bring it up in volume 7 or 8 either, so whatever. No excuse there. But seeing the characters angry and actually, like, boiling over, and then Ruby and Maria having to be the voices of reason, being like, hey, it's fucking cold out here, let's get a move on. We can argue about this later. I'm still recovering from the fact that humanity's on its second go-around. No explanation for how that works. Ozpin wasn't there, so Ozpin just straight up doesn't know, so that wouldn't have actually been part of the question. Like, what is Ozpin hiding? How do you know the parts he wasn't there for? How does he know about the parts he wasn't there for, by the way? It's supposed to be what Ozpin is hiding, yet there's a large stretch of this flashback where he's fucking dead.
Maybe he just re-evolved as he got reincarnated for a little while there, and then once they got humans back, he was good again. Or something. I'm not.
Well, he started reincarnating after humanity came back. Totally destroyed that dude's consciousness, like in fucking Wonder Woman 84, by the way. God, that movie's awful. But no, I love Maria here. I like RWBY trying to smooth things over. Being like, no, you're your own person. And Crow's like, shut the fuck up, RWBY. No, he's not.
Yeah, don't lie to him, RWBY. That was one of my favorite fucking lines.
We're better than that.
Yeah, that was great.
A good moment. Oh,
I mean, again, it's one of those things where this is one of the episodes where I have a pretty high rating for it in the context of just this volume, but it's much lower in the context of the entire show because, yeah, basically what media said, like, it means something here, but it doesn't mean anything later on. None of this actually matters in the long term. It matters in this volume, but it doesn't matter in the long term, and that sucks.
For me, like, later on, in terms of, like, the whole personality melding thing that's going to happen with Oscar and Ozpin, that doesn't seem to come up that much either. I don't really see.
It's because it's not going to happen. They're going to figure out some Deus Ex Machina bullshit way of basically getting rid of Ozpin and having Oscar be the remaining personality. I think that's what's going to happen because they're.
I feel like they probably shouldn't have put that in the first place if that was the case. Maybe if they wanted to have Oscar be the guy, then Ozpin would have just like transferred his memories or something. I don't know.
I've already said this. That's going to be their excuse for making Rose Garden happen. Just mark my words. If I'm wrong, great. I don't. You can make fun of me all you want for being wrong, because I will be thrilled if I am wrong. I will make fun of myself for being wrong about that if they don't do that. But
I don't really see that going down.
I hope so. I hope not, because I hope Oscar does get taken over by Ozpin, because that would at least be a little more interesting. It'd be more interesting if we had a personality for Oscar to feel sorry for losing, which we won't have now, but, it'll still be better, yes, if that happens, of course, but because that's what's supposed to happen. And it would be Deus Ex Machina bullshit if it doesn't happen, and we don't care about Oscar enough for it to not happen, but I still think the writers think that Oscar is a worthwhile character to save his quote-unquote personality, and I hate that I even had to say that word because he doesn't have that. That's how low my expectations are. But yeah, I mean, I kind of already said what I would have said here, which is that, like, yeah, it's great that they get angry at Oscar or Ozpin here. I love that Crow punches him in the fucking face, but why does he ever get back? Why do they let him back in after this? It should not be possible. It's literally insanity. Like, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. The writers of RWBY are so fucking bad that they have made their characters literally insane, because the characters for the entire series have been doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, which is listening to this fucking retard Ozpin. And they keep listening to him over and over and over again, and they expect a different result. He disappoints them every single time, and then when it's revealed that he's actually just a piece of shit and doesn't know what he's doing, they get mad at him, but then they go back to listening to him, and like, are we supposed to forget that all this happened? Apparently we are. You can just go fuck yourself.
What more stuff after this does Ozpin really reveal to them?
Not that he reveals anything, it's that they still keep doing what he wants them to do, which is to take the relic to Atlas.
I think it does kind of explain why they kind of have to do that, though, because they do still want to stop Salem and all. You still kind of have to go through with that.
Well, I mean, that's the purpose of their part in these 3 episodes, so that's how it is. And then the 2 apathy episodes, where they had to, like, regain their, like, kind of composure, and again, like, come up with their own reason for taking it to Atlas. But Dude's complaint is more with, like, Ozpin chipping into the plan in Volume 8, and then that blowing up in their face. Like, the second they start taking Ozpin's advice, shit hits the fan again and gets even worse than ever.
I had forgotten how he was involved with that plan.
Especially with Yang, because Yang's reaction in this episode is so raw and emotional. Like, she actually curses in this, calls him a bastard, and that makes sense because she is realizing that, like, this motherfucker is the reason why she had to grow up without a mom. And I'm glad that they don't dwell on it in this episode or even in this volume, but like,
she could have had 2 moms and she had 0.
Yeah, maybe done a little bit more with that. Like, Yang never really, come to think of it, I don't even think she talks about Raven again after this. Like, I can't think of a situation where she mentions her mom. Like, we can only assume that she filled everyone in on what she saw off screen. Like, off screen, she gave the explanation that Raven is the Spring Maiden and whatever. But we kind of have to assume that because Yang never talks about Raven, which is hilarious because Ruby does.
I do find that funny.
In Volume 9, like, wait, why was my mom with Raven?
Because apparently Raven was into more shit than she let on, I guess. I don't know.
Again, like, I'm glad they don't dwell on it here because there's enough else going on to keep us entertained, especially with the whole, like, Yang and Blake having tension. Like, Yang and Blake have tension this whole volume. You know, going back to the train with Blake babying Yang and coddling her, and that comes into play later on. In this episode, we here at the RWBY Podcast do not condone child violence. We do, however, find it hilarious. Crow punches Ozpin in the face, and then Ozpin bitches out like a coward, and so Oscar is left feeling the pain, which could have done more with that, maybe. Given Oscar a little more something to do in this stretch of the story, because he's kind of just there for this whole stretch after this.
Excuse me, media. When is Oscar ever not just there in the entire series?
When he goes to confront Ironwood.
Okay, one thing.
Sort of.
He's really only there to get shot, so he's still kind of just there, let's be honest.
Yeah.
That wasn't the plan.
When he... Well, he doesn't. It's more Hazel that facilitates Emerald's face turn. Oscar facilitates Hazel facilitating Emerald's face turn, so he gets the assist.
By finally convincing Hazel of the very obvious thing that he should have realized the whole time. Yeah, I'll give it to him.
A win's a win, a dub's a dub.
Checks note.
So in a full NFL season, Oscar would have gone 1-15-1. He'd still be the worst team in the league and the first overall draft pick.
Hold on, no, it's worth that. He would have went 15-1, and that one was against a high school team.
I think he'd still have Glazers in the fandom. I think they'd still be all over this kid. They'd be saying he was the next LeBron for real.
Oh, I mean, dude. If Lance Stroll still has fans in Formula One, which somehow he does, if that's the case, I can understand why some people actually like Oscar.
They would call him LeBrons. Let's be for real.
But speaking of Hazel, he's in this episode too. We get more Legion of Doom stuff. The posse that fucked up the Battle of Haven comes back with their tail tucked between their legs, and Tyrion is gloating. He's gloating as if he didn't get his ass kicked by these same fucking teenagers. Okay, yes, technically he didn't get his ass kicked. He battled Crow to a standstill, and then Ruby sniped him. But a dub's a dub! An L's an L. He still lost.
He still went home with half a tail between his legs.
He is kind of talking mad shit, but it's mostly because he knows Cinder's the one who fucked it all up. He's just kind of riding that high. Same with Watts. We get the reveal that Salem is able to, like, tell that Cinder's alive, and Watts, for whatever reason, is surprised about that. It's like, wait, how do you know? And Tyrion's like, do you dare question our goddess? You know what? You're right, Tyrion. I was kind of dumb for suggesting that.
Watts is like, I know not to press this point. I'm just gonna just not
let it
say
go.
anything.
We also get a line that I appreciate, mostly because it kind of does come back, but never really comes to fruition because of how fucked up Volume 7 and 8 ended up being with Ironwood, which is that apparently the plan was to attack Vacuo next and save Atlas for last. But Hazel revealing the news that Ozpin is back, and apparently this is the quickest he's reincarnated or reconstituted himself. This is the quickest that he's managed to jump bodies and possess someone. Like, this is an abnormally short amount of time for him.
Woohoo, lucky us.
Yeah, lucky us.
I feel like they could have gone without adding that data to it.
And then that he has taken the lamp to Atlas means that their whole plan, whatever the fuck it is, could be foiled because Ozpin is, quote, the only person who can talk sense into Ironwood. First of all, that is a bold fucking statement to suggest that Ozpin can talk sense into Ironwood and that he is the only person who can talk sense into Ironwood. But at the same time, kind of right, because Ozpin's not really around in Volume 7, and then he only comes back when things are beyond the pale and Ironwood is a lost cause, so maybe they were right. We'll never know if Ozpin could have talked sense into Ironwood.
Except Ironwood was not really, like, ever super obedient towards Ozpin in the first place either.
Yeah, which is why it's a bold statement to make in the first place.
It's why we
So-
liked Ironwood until his character was assassinated.
So I'm wondering if Salem's guys don't really have a good grasp of the situation here themselves, which is fine. I mean, they don't have like spies constantly hovering over Ruby and the crew, giving them valuable intel. So they could be wrong about stuff. It makes sense that they would be.
The main takeaway is that if Ironwood came to his senses, opened up his borders, and formed a united front against Salem, then no amount of Grimm forces could crack that nut. Those iron nuts, if you will. Which could very well be true, because the only reason why she's able to get as far in Volume 7 and 8 as she does is because Tyrion and Watts managed to infiltrate Atlas, stirred up a bunch of political bullshit, and then Ironwood lost his mind because no one was able to talk sense into him, and then he wasn't able to form a united front against Salem, and so she was able to, crack that nut and destroy Atlas. But then, heading into Volume 10, it feels like there's a united front now. We'll see how that goes.
Well, if it's united, it's just because it's the only front left at that point is the main thing.
So we do get the game plan, and the fact that it is a change in the game plan does actually factor into stuff that happens in Volume 7, mostly because of Cinder, because Cinder was trying to get ahead of the game and take the staff out from under everyone's nose in order to prove herself to Salem, but then she's not really able to do that on her own because Watts and Tyrion are already there stirring shit up. I do hate that we see Salem scream. It would have been so much more intense if the door just shut and then it cut to the next scene. Yeah, this whole sequence actually does factor into a bunch of shit that is going to happen for the rest of this volume and into volume 7 and 8. And I really appreciate that. It's kind of a very well done scene, ending notwithstanding. And then the gang arrives at Brunswick Farm and we enter the next episode, The Coming Storm.
This is the best part of the volume. This is the part where even after, I've already said, this volume is one that I think is kind of shit now. But The Coming Storm and Alone in the Woods is still fucking fantastic. I can't argue that at all. So yeah, this shit's still pretty good. I gave this one over a 9 out of 10, but it's still not perfect because still have the kind of small issue of Ice Cream Lolly versus Half-Breed fight, which is the fight choreography is fine, but Ice Cream Lolly needs more of a motivation to fight Half-Breed.
We've gone over
Yeah.
that a bunch of times. I would say, if we wanted to say one more thing about it, you could add in the context that it seems as though they wanted more action in this.
Yeah, this is probably the most egregious this volume gets of having an action sequence for the sake of having an action sequence. The train fight makes sense. It's an inciting incident for the whole volume. Them fighting against the apathy makes sense for where it's at. The whole climax makes sense for where it's at. As much as you might complain about Cordovan and her contributions to that climax, it's still the time to have a climax. The final stretch of episodes. It's the middle of the volume. It's been a couple episodes since we've had a real fight scene, so gotta have a fight scene because it's just time for one, and motivations or narrative cohesion be damned. It's very volumes 1 and 2 coded. It's choreographed like a volume 2 fight as well, and that's not just because Neo is involved and does some of the same tricks she does when she fought Yang, but just it's a bar, you got the crowd just kind of standing there watching it, not really interacting with the fight, just kind of there. The various moves, the up close and personal stuff with Cinder and Neo's hand-to-hand combat, the fact that it ends just as abruptly as it began, it's very much the sort of thing that Monty would have just thrown in at 3 a.m. in the morning a week before the episode aired.
Okay, so that aside, this is a great episode. I like that, Weiss is right to point out that they can't actually stay there. She's actually right, as it turns out. I think that's kind of cool. I like how Ruby is the one that's let's actually do something about this. Let's make this happen. She's still acting like the leader. It's good characterization. I do think it's kind of funny / odd that Blake points out that the tractor isn't street legal. Since when the fuck was the former terrorist such a narc? They don't know where that's coming from. But I do really like the Blake and Yang scene. I've talked about that before. Yang being scared of Adam. It makes sense given that he cut her fucking arm off. Her saying that she's tired, which is immediately relevant because it's a clue to what the apathy are doing to them. I think that's really cool. I like that we don't know if the Adam sighting is real or not, because we do know that he is actually kind of following them, but we don't actually know if that was him there or not.
The clue is the fact that he has this mask on. There's another Adam bit in the first episode when Blake is cutting the train car, paralleling the black trailer, and we see Adam and he doesn't have his mask on. He has the bandana on instead, and his hood up. So that was like legit Adam tailing them. This Adam that Yang sees out in the snow has his mask on. So it's a lot more ambiguous whether this is something that Yang is actually seeing, or if it's all in her head, or if it was really Adam and Yang just kind of like visualized him wearing the mask. Leaves it up to interpretation.
Yeah, I like that. I like that they're doing that, which would be, this is kind of one of my complaints from the fucking previous backstory that we just got, is that they weren't leaving things up for interpretation. They just overly explained everything. This is where they're leaving things up for interpretation. I think that works. I like that Blake says she'll protect Yang, and that's clearly a bad choice of words, and they actually fucking acknowledge that that's a bad choice of words and that Yang is not happy with that. Again, I wish they had more development from here, but this would have been a good starting point to develop their relationship if they actually bother to do that. I'll complain about that later near the end of the volume. But anyway, this scene is very good because not only does it do things to build up the relationship between Blake and Yang, romantic or not, which obviously, yes, we know by this point they were making it romantic. It also serves the immediate plot of the apathy and what's going on with how Yang is acting tired and everything. That shows the apathy are starting to have an effect. And I really, really like that. I like that RWBY hesitantly saying that they should probably keep the liquor room closed to keep Crow away from it. Weiss being the one who instantly grasps exactly what she's meaning without really saying anything. I like how Weiss starts getting all tired and RWBY is the first to notice that she's got something that's kind of off with her. I like that RWBY is clearly shown to be the one with the strongest willpower throughout all of this. And I like the slow creeping build toward knowing something is wrong, but we don't know exactly what is wrong. It is weird that the best arc probably in the entirety of this show is a horror, like a semi-horror arc, but it is. And I have to admit they do it very, very well. And I like the tease the basement door moving at the end. Yeah, that's obvious, but it works. And they've done all the other homework and the other buildup that is more difficult to do to deserve a cheap tease, like doing the basement door moving at the end, right? They've done all the other buildup to deserve that. So, and that sets up what I think is probably the best episode in the history of the show. So as much as I talk shit on this volume currently, and I will do so more as we go on, this episode and the next episode, Alone in the Woods, I think is probably the best thing they've ever done, straight up.
So, like, part of the core of horror is not scary thing. It's why is things scary. And a big reason why things are scary is the powerlessness that comes with that. So horror episodes are really fucking hard to do in the context of an action sequence. Because, okay, if this were a more standard horror setup where, like, oh, you see the claw marks and the destroyed furniture and stuff like that, like, okay, it's just a monster. Now we have to go kick its ass. But the fact that these people just laid down and then never got back up, that's a much more psychological thing. Like, was it famine? Was it disease? Was it something else? Was there like a serial killer? No, there doesn't seem to be any wounds. So it creates much more of a mystery and suspense. And when it's revealed to be one of the cooler Grimm in the series, a Grimm that isn't very strong, that isn't powerful in a fight, but has a powerful psychological effect even on our heroes, even on our veterans like Crow, that is terrifying, because you're taking these characters who are normally incredibly competent, incredibly strong, some would even argue too competent and too strong, and you're taking that power away. That's where the horror comes in. That's why this episode is legitimately scary. There's another horror episode in RWBY later on, in Volume 8, and even though that is also one of the better episodes in Volume 8, it doesn't feel as scary because it is just a big monster that they have to fight. And they also have Ruby there, who is getting better at her silver eyes. So it's like, okay, yes, the Hound we know is incredibly powerful. It's one of the stronger Grimm we've seen. It managed to completely mop the floor with Yang, Jean, Rin, and Oscar. No problem. It's able to like hold its own in a power contest against Penny, who is like one of the most powerful beings in the series. So yes, the Hound is very scary. But at the end of the day, the Hound is just a monster. And yes, it's a monster that represents them. It's a cool, interesting monster, but it's a monster nonetheless. Whereas this, like, you can almost erase the apathy and have it be like a chemical, or like a gas leak, or like a mad scientist who is experimenting with something to make people more complacent. Like, you could replace this with so many other things and it wouldn't lose its horror edge. It would still be as scary of a scenario as it is. Because again, it's the psychological effect. It's not a physical threat to them.
It is a very well done thing in that they do make this actually scary for the heroes because it's not a direct physical or ability challenge to them. It's challenging and taking away something else, like taking away their willpower. And since I guess we're basically talking about Alone in the Woods itself now, I think my favorite thing, one, I love how Ruby is the last holdout here, but I think my favorite thing about all this, and I don't want to repeat, what media's already said, like this does work very well, but I think my absolute favorite thing is that throughout this 2-episode arc, the stuff that they are quote unquote induced to say by the apathy are things that they were probably, I'll say definitely already thinking.
Well, Weiss, even before the whole revelation, she didn't want to fucking go back to Alice. She hates it there. Like, she was against this whole plan from the get-go. That's why she's the first one to fall under its influence, like, definitively. And the next person, or someone who is falling under it at the exact same time, Yang is the one who is the most upset with Ozpin. Same thing with Crow. Crow was very upset with Ozpin. He felt like his whole life was worthless. That's why he's the next to go. And then Blake and Oscar, they don't have as many stakes in this, which is weird on Oscar's account, but they kind of fall under the influence the following morning. Like, they don't really fall under the influence that night the way that Crow, Yang, and Weiss do. And then yes, Ruby and Maria are the last two holdouts, and Maria, you almost have an Usopp effect with her, which is really neat, which is the fact that she's kind of already given up on being the hero. So, whereas Ruby isn't affected by the apathy as much because she has the strongest willpower, Maria is one of the last holdouts because she didn't have any real willpower to drain in the first place. In One Piece, there's an arc called Thriller Bark where they fight this girl named Perona. She uses phantoms to make people feel really negative. It's really overpowered at that point in the story, but they have no effect on Usopp because Usopp is already a negative person, so he's the only one immune to her powers, so he's able to clinch that dub for the Straw Hats, and that's kind of how Maria plays in this episode. She falls under the influence even less than Ruby does, strangely. Like, Ruby does end up succumbing to them later on, for a very brief moment before getting her wits back after she drops the lamp. But Maria never really falls under that influence because she was already retired. She's someone who was already scared, lost her eyes, quit being a huntress, and just has been a recluse ever since. And it's been decades since then. And it's only in interacting with Ruby and seeing her potential and seeing this group kind of band together and manage to defeat the apathy despite having so many disadvantages in that scenario, that encourages her to, like, you know what, maybe I can still do some good here. Maybe I do still have something to offer to this world. Maybe I have found someone that I can help give advice to and teach her some tricks on the Silver Eyes. Doesn't really teach her tricks, but does teach her kind of like the emotional place she has to be in to use her Silver Eye powers. And then, like, they form a very granddaughter-grandmother sort of relationship from that point forward, and it's very sweet. And it's something that I think RWBY really needed, especially since Yang isn't filling that role in this volume. Yang and RWBY barely interact in this volume. So, like, RWBY is shouldering a lot of this responsibility herself, and she is taking it upon herself to continue doing this mission, despite how hopeless and worthless it seems. And she is still very young. Like, she's, what, 16 here. Everyone else is like 18, aside from Oscar, who's like 14, 15, somewhere in that ballpark. But she's putting all this responsibility on her shoulders, and she's not dealing with the implications that this actually has for her. She's still blindly running off into a career that is undoubtedly going to be her death. And she knows it. Like, in the deepest, backest part of her mind, she knows that this is what fucking killed her mom. And she's just not wanting to address that, not wanting to admit that, because it's just easier that way. I love RWBY a lot.
Really? I had
Yeah,
no idea.
I think we've probably gone through this this particular segment of stuff enough now. Let's move on, shall we, to the next thing.
Another flashback episode.
Sadly,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
must
Another
say my-
flashback? My favorite! I love double flashback.
Yeah, but before the flashback trauma happens, I have to bow out because I have work tomorrow.
All right. See you, man.
We at least got you for half the podcast.
Yeah, glad you could make it.
Yeah, see you, Nara, man.
The Grimm Reaper, episode 7. Cinder and Neo are plotting to kill RWBY through a stupid fucking loophole technicality. Like, oh, Salem gave me express orders not to kill RWBY, but she didn't give you those orders, so you can kill RWBY without getting punished, and I won't be punished because I'm not the one who technically did it.
As if that would work, and Salem would be like, well, she's working under you.
Salem's like, okay, Cinder, I'll give you that one. You exploited a loophole. I don't see Salem doing that.
No, I don't think she's going to do that. I think she's going to be very pissed off regardless.
Not that it matters, because they never kill RWBY. Obviously, they're not going to kill the fucking main character. It's almost like, why even have the loophole and have the stipulation in the first place? Like, if they had an opportunity to kill RWBY and then don't because of Salem's rule, that would be fine. That would be very plot and character-driven storytelling. But the fact that they don't even ever have the opportunity to kill RWBY means that it really doesn't ever factor into anything happening.
Also, why did Salem not want to kill RWBY again? I forgot.
She wants to turn her into a hound.
Oh, okay, that's right.
That's the implication that comes in Volume 8. It doesn't give a reason, like it very purposely doesn't give a specific reason until Volume 8 when they encounter the hound and RWBY's like, oh, that's why she wants me alive when she didn't want Maria alive. This is actually relevant to the flashback, which is why I'm kind of dwelling on this, which is that, like, Talk is an agent of Salem. She was kind of the Tyrion of her day. That's actually how she's been described by some of the people who worked on this episode. And she wanted Maria dead. She doesn't want RWBY dead. So what changed? Oh, summer happened. She encountered Summer Rose, and apparently during that encounter, Salem learned that she could do something new, which is why so many people are kind of convinced that we're going to see Summer as a grim monster at some point in the future.
I would support that level of trauma.
I'd be down for it.
Yeah.
I would too, so long as they don't find a cure for it.
Oh,
Of course
God,
not.
that would...
No.
That would be... Oh, God, that'd be
No.
the worst thing ever. Oh, my God. Oh, you're giving me... Ooh, that gives me chills.
I really hope I don't have to eat my fucking words on that.
You wouldn't be you eating your words. You'd still be right that it's terrible. There's no way that could be good, okay? So you would be eating your words.
Yeah, but I've been saying that there's no way that's gonna happen for the first several years of this podcast series.
Oh, no. You can't say that. I know there's a possibility.
But then in Volume 8, when that happened, people were like, oh, no, this is a possibility now. Like, God damn it, I don't want to even think of that being on the table.
Listen, we're just gonna clip this moment, and when it does happen, we're just gonna get gang up on you and be like, you did this.
I jinxed the whole series.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, if they're already doing that shit, we're beyond fucked at that point.
They're
I'm
just
kind
gonna
of fine with it. The only guy who's currently a Grim Monster is some dude we don't even know, so I don't really care if he gets cured.
Well, he's dead.
No, but the point is, if they're gonna do that, if they cure Summer, that's when it's a problem.
I mean, the most they
Seeing her
could
as
do
a
is
Grim
just-
Monster is
yeah,
great, nice and
seeing
traumatic.
her-
I love that.
Yeah, Singer would be great, but
Give RWBY even more trauma, yes, please. Like she's already at that level. We can give her more. It's fine.
It's like how we kept on saying throughout our Volumes 4 and 5 podcast that they should bring Pyrrha back as like a Neo or Emerald Illusion. And they do, but they don't do it to torture Jean. They do it to torture Ruby, which is still fun.
Which I'm actually fine with, because I kind of agree with Coop on how they don't need to keep torturing Jean with that. So I kind of prefer that they torture Ruby with it instead, actually. I mean, I like this episode, and this is one that doesn't get hurt by anything that happens later. So I gave this like almost a 9 out of 10. I gave it an 8.7 out of 10. The fucking Grim Reaper shit is badass. It looks awesome. The fucking Samurai Jack bridge that she's walking on is the background looks gorgeous.
Fucking aura farming like a motherfucker.
Yeah, she's cool as shit. She's hot. Her weapons are sick as fuck. The Talk fight is so clever, and like Talk's semblance is cool. Her character is just cool. The weapons with the whole like kind of like magnetism thing is really fucking cool.
Yep, gravity dust, baby.
The second form of the weapon for Maria is really cool. The voice acting is fantastic. Like, you really feel the pain when she gets blinded. Like, that was very well done. And then even stuff after that, like Maria, like, well, I'm nothing but a disappointment, so you're well on your way. When she says that to Crow, it's like, yeah, I mean, she's right at that point. And I like that she points out things like Ruby is already braver than she is. I think that's great. We have confirmation that Nora's a Shotokan. I love the architecture of Argus. It's a really cool, like, kind of hybrid of, it's supposed to be a hybrid of Solitas and Atlas, and it actually feels that way. I think that's very well done. It's one of their better settings. And I've actually talked to media about this recently, that we haven't like focused enough on the settings, and we might even eventually do a podcast on that later on, depending on how much we have to stall before the fucking next volume. I think Argus looks cool. I like the design of it a lot. And finally, I love seeing Saffron and Terra and their kid. It is so refreshing to see an actual happy, healthy, functioning couple with an actual child in a world where people die constantly, and they clearly need to have lots of kids. I know I harp on this too much, but I only harp on it because the writers of the show just kind of forget that completely. This should not be the third couple that is currently in existence in this universe at this point. That should not be the case. But they work, and I like them, and I think, I think they're a nice little touch here for everything, and I like
Yang and Weiss have a fucking awakening. This is obviously a lesbian science baby of some sort, so card's still on the table for Yang and Blake to do the same. Meanwhile, Weiss is, Jean is looking better and better every time. So, Jean, how many sisters did you say you had? Because 7, huh? So that makes 8 kids in total. Now, we start now.
It's a very good thing that John's parents were so active in the bedroom. You would expect it to see it more often, is the thing. Yeah.
She's gonna be Snow White and the 7 toddlers.
Yeah.
I'm realizing this now.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm tweeting that. Hold on. I'm gonna tweet that.
Based Sock.
You guys keep talking about this episode.
I already said everything I had to say. Sock just closed down the fucking podcast with that. What else is there left to say?
It's an okay episode. I got really nothing to say about it too much, I don't think. It's fine. It's there.
Yeah, it's not one of the most eye-catching. It's not one of the, I think because we kind of already covered everything. I basically went through the whole plot of it. It serves its function. If there's any problem, I'd say that what it ends up taking us to is the problem, but we're not really quite there then. If we want to move on to the next one, which I think we're probably about to do, move on to Dead End number 8. The fucking Tweedledee and Tweedledum Atlas guards just piss me the fuck off.
Okay, yeah, we're talking about episode 8 now, which is Dead End, a Dead End episode indeed.
What's the point of them? I don't like this whole thing of like Atlas is supposed to be like the badass military, and then they make Atlas so fucking lame in this volume, only to make them badass and scary again in the next 2 volumes. How does that make sense? Like,
well, to be fair, these guys are like in a backwater garrison holding a small force on a sliver of land that Atlas kind of halfway cares about, is sort of the vibe I got from it.
That's fair. And honestly, I would be fine with that if their leader wasn't supposed to be the big bad of the volume. If they were just a footnote, that would be okay. I get that. I mean, I still think the humor just misses by a country fucking mile here. What happened to RWBY actually being funny like it was in volumes 1 and 2? Because none of this is funny at all. Like, it just pisses me off. But in terms of making them like rejects because they're in a backwater, as Coop pointed out, I would be okay with that. If fucking midget old lady bitch, who's I can't fucking bother to remember her name, wasn't supposed to be the big bad. Then it would be fine. But the fact that I can't take her seriously, and that just ruins the whole rest of this volume, as far as I'm concerned. And that was another thing that made this volume worse for me in retrospect, is like the whole section of this volume, episodes 8 to 13, that's almost half the volume, is ruined by the fucking ugly old lady bitch, midget old lady bitch. She's so pathetic. She's so lame. She's not funny. Her rivalry with Maria is so annoying and not funny at all. It never made me laugh. She's not a threat. She's not intimidating. It just feels cheap. And it feels like the main characters aren't earning anything. Like, why are they even bothering with her? It even cheapens the Adam versus Bumblebee fight a little bit. Why was this the main villain here? Like, how are we supposed to feel anything for this? Why are we supposed to care? It's so bad that by the end of this, Ruby uses her silver eyes on her own, like willingly triggers them purposefully for the first time in the end of this volume. And nobody talks about that. I never see anybody mentioning that. It's completely forgotten, basically, because of how bad, this last act of the volume is and how lame. I still can't fucking remember her name. I'm not even doing it on purpose. Like fucking old lady. Cordovan.
Yeah.
Fine. Yeah. She can fuck off. That's how bad she is, and that's how bad this part of the volume is. That, like, it's supposed to be this big moment for Ruby. I know I'm skipping around, but I don't care. Like, I'll probably shut up most of the rest of this podcast after this. It's just, who cares after this?
I think she was kind of stretched out a little bit more than she needed to be. I get the initial point of her basically just being like a bureaucratic obstacle. Like, you guys can't go off into the water, or I can't let you.
Can't let you do that, Star Fox.
I get that. And that's fine. I'm fine with stuff like that happening. They need to find some means by which to get around that. I think having her be like hyper maniacal about it and like exaggerating it too much and having a giant robot and everything, that was them putting a little bit too much into it with her. She would have been fine had she just like refused them the boat.
Again, if she was just a stepping stone to whatever the main baddie was, which I guess she kind of is, but they do it in such a stupid way, then it would be okay. Like, I don't mind her being, pathetic in a footnote if she's treated as a footnote, but she's not. She's treated as the main big bad in this volume.
A way to do it would, maybe they could go up against like the sea monster thing, and then Cordovan doesn't really involve herself with that, but she thanks them for taking care of the sea monster by, going against her own rules and letting them be transported to Atlas. Then maybe, as they're on their trip to Atlas, that's when Adam attempts to waylay them. You could have it like that.
Or do the Adam stuff first before the Leviathan, which is kind of how it's structured anyway.
Either which way. I feel like Cordovan I think she just needed to be convinced. That's typically how you get around that sort of obstacle in most stories.
Or just have her not be so fucking annoying about it.
I'm fine with her being annoying about it. So, like, if it was just a little bit tad more subdued. Like, I think that was the problem with her, is that they made it, like, overly comically exaggerated with a lot of the stuff that she did.
Like, she's not indicative of the Atlas characters we've met so far or will meet later on. She's just kind of an outcast, and they do make a joke about that. They're like, oh, maybe they just stationed you here because they were so fucking annoyed with you. But it's not fun. And this is a complaint that people said about the Star Wars sequels, and with General Hux specifically, where when you compare him with Tarkin, or with the other Imperial officers we got in the original trilogy, even when they're kind of losing their cool and stuff, they're still dignified. Cordovan isn't dignified. She's a lot more like General Hux, where she's just a fucking joke gag character that is also simultaneously supposed to be taken somewhat seriously because of the position of authority she has, but she doesn't use it in any, like, interesting or cool way. She's just kind of annoying and catty and vindictive and also racist, which I did appreciate. One thing I liked about this episode, in episode 8, she makes a comment about, like, oh, the less than reputable type of people, and Weiss stands up for Blake. Like, what does that mean?
I'm not certain that they should have even included that. They've been back and forth on that so much, and especially at this tail end of the volume, like you said, with Adam losing the mask and showing the burn on his face, like, they have kept it up, but they didn't. Even in Atlas, not a whole lot came of it. I feel like at this stage, they were still like flipping back and forth about it, it seemed like to me. And I don't know, if they kept it in, I would have hoped they would do something with that later rather than kind of how it wound up. Otherwise, I would say as it happened, I would say like the same with all of it, that they probably shouldn't have even bothered putting it in because it's just there.
Especially with how this plotline ends, which I'll get to when we actually get to episode 13. I'm not going to skip around like, dude.
My general annoyance of this whole back half of the volume, it's just easier to explain it that way, because it just kind of all goes together.
I love RWBY assuring Weiss that they're not going to sell her to her father. They're not going to let her go to Atlas alone. They're still going to drag her ass to Atlas because that's what friends are for, but they're not going to let her go at it alone.
It's still a fucked up thing to be like, it's fucked up that we have to say that, but we're saying it anyway because we love you.
RWBY really be like, yes, you're still going to go to this place you hate, but at least we're going to be together. BFFs.
Do you know how hard I worked to get out? God damn it.
RWBY, don't make me put you back on the trial period. Don't make me demote you. They reveal to Jean and the others what Jin revealed, and Jean blows a gasket and takes it out on Oscar, which is valid. I love that RWBY is the one who, talks it down. Again, she's just so fucking good in this volume. Such a relief after how nothing she was in volume 5. A little flanderized still. She's not as nerdy as I would have liked. There's a lot of opportunities. The fact that she doesn't geek out about any of the Atlas tech that's revealed in this stretch of episodes. Not that she was ever really into Atlas. She was into the CCT tower.
It's not really specific, hand weapon tech, so I think that's why she doesn't really care. She's never really been shown to geek out on anything that isn't handheld huntsman or huntress weapon tech. So that's why I kind of can forgive it, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm just saying that in volume 2 she was pretty hyped to go to the tower. Either that or she was actually just using that as an excuse to keep Weiss and Neptune apart, as friends do.
I'm going with that
I'm
personally.
going with that. Yeah, good decision.
I can go with Neptune. Don't make me laugh. RWBY is at most the second biggest White Knight shipper because the actual biggest White Knight shipper is Yang.
Yeah.
So yeah, the RWBY's getting frustrated at how everyone is taking this, especially Crow. He ditches out on them to get wasted, and we get the conversation with her and Maria about the Silver Eyes and also Maria's semblance, which is basically spider sense, preflexes. And we get the whole mystery, oh wait, hold on. If it only works on Grimm, how come it worked on Cinder? And as the audience, we already know that it's because Cinder has the Grimm arm, even though that's retcon. We won't harp on that. RWBY never really has a reaction to Cinder having a Grimm arm. She finds out at the end of Volume 7, and she just doesn't even, register it. It's so, not even a factor that I forgot that she even saw Cinder in Volume 7 until I went back and watched that clip as I was editing one of these videos. And then Oscar runs away like a bitch.
Yeah, he does do that, and
then he comes back.
Yeah, I didn't get to complain about that yet. So I do have something to complain about still.
It's all good. He just went clothes shopping.
Yeah, which is when he comes back and Jean gives us one of the worst lines in the history of the series, which is, this team just isn't the same without you, Oscar. Which,
technically true.
He's right. It's better without him.
He is technically right. It is different when you lose someone. Jean would know. Speaking of which, we get that scene in this 9th episode.
Also, yeah.
Lost. Because that's what the plot is in this episode. So yes, they see, or by they I mean Jean mostly, sees Pyrrha's memorial, which they were together for a whole school year. Which is not a whole lot of time in the grand scheme of things, but it's enough time to where Jean maybe should have known that Pyrrha coincidentally lived in the same neighborhood as his sister.
That's true. That's fair. I can't even argue that.
Yeah, that probably should have come up at some point, I think.
It honestly should have probably come up at the start of this volume where, hey, we're gonna have to get to Alice and we'll hop on an airship. And Jean could be like, hey, my sister lives in Argus. We can stay there while we wait for clearance or whatever. But no, it just kind of dropped on her lap, which is fine. It's a better reveal that way, especially from an episode by episode, especially reaction type deal, because we know that fucking Rooster Teeth were all about the people reacting to the series, Murder Birds and stuff, which I wonder how much of that influenced the way that they write around these episodes. Always trying to end on some bit of shock.
Surprise or something. They did that a lot, yeah.
Or a shipping moment. I'm gonna go back through.
Do that afterwards. I take your word for it, Media. I'll assume you're right. You know what? I'll stab dude in the back now to join your side on this. If you just don't talk about it.
Every episode, I'm pretty sure, ends with some kind of revelation or shipping moment or surprise twists or reveal or appearance, and it's very clearly geared towards Murder of Birds, his reaction channel. And the other reaction channels, obviously, but Murder of Birds is the one who has actually, like, the RWBY crew had actually filmed a reaction to one of Murder of Birds' reactions, and then he filmed a reaction to that, and it was so bizarre.
I don't like to use the word, but it starts with CRI and ends with NGE. And I don't even blame Murder of Birds for it. Honestly, like, he already knew what he was about. Like, I don't really have a problem with him. Like,
Oh, I fucking love I love Arnold,
Dude,
man.
dude knows what
he's
he's
the
about,
fucking
and
man. All right.
I'm fine if you want to glaze. I don't mind someone just like glazing a show, and like he's not somebody who like talks shit on people who have issues with the show. He just like stays in his lane and likes what he likes. And you know what, dude? Good for you, man. My problem is with the actual show themselves pandering to that sort of thing. I don't mind him going along with it. Of course he would go along with it, but I do have an issue with the show being like, oh, this is what we should be targeting. It's like, no, you need to be trying to make the best thing that you can make. You should have pride in whatever the story is that you're creating. That's what you should care about. You should have some level of discernment on like making the thing the best you can make it, and damn what anybody else thinks, right? And that's clearly not what they're doing. That does explain a lot of why the show is not that great. So, and it's not because of him. That's clearly already the way they were thinking. So it's not an indictment on Murder of Birds. It's an indictment on Rooster Teeth, well, former Rooster Teeth, whatever themselves. That's the issue that I have.
I recall around this time, during the original release of the volume, it was topical even then that they were kind of writing in reaction to the audience a little bit. That was speculated on. Nobody really knew for sure or anything. We don't really know for sure even now, but it made sense. It seemed kind of like that could be a thing that was happening.
Well, like I said, Volume 6, they were very open about the fact that they read a bunch of the criticisms for Volume 5 and wanted to directly, in their words, learn from their mistakes or improve as writers, but it really does come off as very lampshaded. We talked about that with the first episode.
I'm fine with them doing that. I don't think they should have been public about it in any way, probably.
Oh, it was so obvious, I think, is
Yeah.
the problem. Like, even if they weren't being public about it, in terms of volume, like, that's what I talked. That was my rant at the beginning of the volume, was that it's so obvious that they're reacting to Volume 5 that they don't need to say anything to confirm.
Well, I wonder
that.
if the thing is, like, if they hadn't said, though, would that sort of mystique or surrounding the same thing, would it have been as obvious? We can't really know because people already kind of had the information, and that was the sort of conversation that was floating about at the time. I'm not certain it would have been immediately apparent. I think we probably now, looking back on it all these years later, probably would have arrived at the same conclusions. But back then, I'm not certain that would have been a topic of conversation, if you get what I'm saying, But either way, I think trying to garner reactionary appeal, that's sort of cemented in that area as well, because nowadays, reaction stuff, I don't hear nearly as much about it now.
You see it with like a seasonal anime, because I feel like reaction channels have kind of taken the place of forums in a lot of regards, because fandom wikis and stuff fucking suck now, and so does social media. And so the best way to engage, or one of the like safest, like, I use the term safe very like loosely here, but one of the like easiest, safest ways to engage with the fandom is to just go to YouTube and type in like whatever show you're watching, reaction, go into the comments, and then have a conversation there. So I think reaction channels have kind of slotted into that niche rather than the reactions for their own sake, the way they were 6-7 years ago. From the time that like volumes 5 and 6 were coming out up through the COVID. I think COVID did a lot of damage to the way reaction channels used to be. During COVID, everyone suddenly found a whole shitload of free time.
And there was also a lot of stuff that got canceled or wasn't airing during COVID, so they didn't really have a lot to react to.
Yeah, except for like, oh hey, now that all these things are getting canceled, I'm gonna jump into One Piece. I know so many reaction channels that did that got into One Piece because of COVID.
Well, One Piece was, if I recall, somewhat more reliable still about their stuff. Well, most anime, actually, because Japan didn't really have the same sort of quarantining that other places have. I guess
Well,
that
what
does
they
make
did,
sense.
they just kept everybody the fuck out of their country, and then their country just kind of continued on as normal because they just kept.
And they also already had the mask culture. Like, there was already a thing in Japan that if you feel the sniffles at all, you wear a mask. So they didn't have to worry about, like, that aspect of the pandemic. Also, they don't trust China, so...
This is where Japan's like, oh, we have an excuse to flex our xenophobia and no one's gonna call us out for it? All right, bet, let's go. And that's basically what they did.
Yep.
Is like,
Yeah. Their xenophobia and their germophobia both, like, came in clutch there.
Yeah, and it worked perfectly. And I was only pissed because I had a trip scheduled and they didn't open the country in time for me to go. So that pissed me off. So I had to wait another 6 years to go to Japan. Because I had it scheduled for 5 years because I had it scheduled for 2021, and now I'm going in a couple months.
He'll be gone by the time you watch this video, probably.
Yeah, that's true. This will come out while I'll probably be in. I'll put it right now. I will be in Nagoya when this podcast finally airs. We'll see.
The Nagoyim in Nagoya.
Speaking of Nagoyas, Mercury Black is in this episode.
Yeah.
Emoji.
That is the stupid.
Are you sure you don't drink alcohol, media?
I haven't had anything to drink in the 2.5, almost 3 hours we've been recording. I haven't had a single drink of water or anything.
Oh, so you're just dehydrated and delirious at this point.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I've got water right here. I would give you some through the internet, but sadly, there are no pipes that connect us. Unfortunately,
I have both water and whiskey. I would offer you the whiskey, but not the water, because I have more whiskey than water available to me at this moment within my reaching distance.
Yeah, we get Mercury and Emerald. Mercury's like training, and Emerald's kind of like pissing about her one-sided crush on Cinder. And Mercury's like, dude, I know you didn't have a mommy or daddy who loved you, but I had a dad who hated me, and he stole my semblance. I'm apparently the only person in this whole series who doesn't have a semblance, even though there are a lot of characters who either don't have semblances that have been revealed, or just don't have semblances outright. Granted, they could get one, Mercury can. So that's the difference. I don't understand his frustration about, like, I had to work harder than anyone because I didn't have a semblance to use as a crutch. Like, there's a ton of people who don't have useful semblances in the show, or have very situational ones. Like, Ren's semblance is only good when he is having to hide from Grimm. It doesn't do him jack shit in a tournament setting the way that, like, Emerald's does.
you don't understand media, okay? His only option was to tune his legs to the most high performance standards. He had to make it so that he can do the moonwalk and the gravity lean and mimic Michael Jackson with them. You don't get the true power that he achieved by having to work through that limitation.
And then Tyrion comes in with his, like, kind of nihilism Joker shit. Love what you do. You're thinking about this whole thing wrong. And then he reveals that him and the good doctor are heading to Atlas. They're heading to the next volume. See you there.
I do want to just touch again on, like, the whole Tyrion thing. Like, again, I say this always. I'm never having a bad time when he's on screen, man. Like, his line delivery is so good. It's creepy, but he's, like, kind of right a lot of the time with what he says. And I think that's what's so awesome and kind of disturbing about him. I just want to touch on that real quick, because it's like, he's right. This is something that people teach, like, people try to talk about this all the time, and, like, there's different philosophies on this, but, like, I was always taught this, that, like, you should enjoy what you do for a job. That's the best way to be happy. It's not about making the most money. It's about enjoying what you're doing. And it's like, so in a lot of ways, a lot of people philosophically would agree with that point that Tyrion's making, but it's Tyrion that's making it, and he's making it in, like, the creepiest ways. Like, do what makes you happy, children. Please, I'm begging you. Like, I love it. Like, that's cool, because, like, I like when villains make good points, but they're still, like, not supposed to be good. Like, we're not supposed to be questioning whether the heroes are right. It's just, this villain's kind of crazy, but they're also kind of right. And I like that Tyrion makes me feel that. I think that's cool.
Well, I think in this, like, particular context, though, that it might be sort of meant to like show this a little bit. Mercury and Emerald very much so have very tenuous reasons as to why they're with Salem in the first place. So
That is, and
you know,
Tyrion knows that.
it's sort of like maybe it's meant to kind of like carry some sort of like threat underneath it or something. I'm not certain. I've always kind of been a little bit back and forth. Like Emerald ditching the thing, I thought how she wound up getting out of it back in Volume 8 was a little bit too early with that. And Mercury, he's got even less reason, especially after that, kind of. I've always wondered how they were going to deal with that with him. This might be kind of one of the reasons that he stays. Like maybe this conversation. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do with it. I'm not sure about him.
Yeah, he doesn't really do much in the following volumes other than just more of the same.
That's what I'm saying is they don't go back to him a lot. So I don't really...
Like, he's not in Volume 7 at all. He's only in very little of Volume 8. His biggest contribution to Volume 8 is a scene almost identical to this one, where, like, he's talking shit about Emerald for having feelings, and then Tyrion comes in and is like, hey, we're gonna fuck off to the next, not the next volume, but the following volume after that.
I didn't get this across, really, but it seems like a whole lot of his reason for existence is to shit talk Emerald all the time. And if she's gone, like, what the hell is he going to do? I would imagine he could probably get out of there just so that he could team up with Emerald again, just to shit talk her more. That seems like a good enough reason for him to, like, do a fucking face turn.
I would love to see him, like, somewhere he just tries to shit talk someone and he realizes nobody there and he's like, oh, fuck.
That would be the craziest, like, realization there.
That'd be fun.
Tries to take Watson's spot of shit-talking Cinder.
No, I'm talking like literally he's just like watching some more like Grimm get spawned and he'd just be like, geez, Emerald, chill out. Oh, and just like walks away or something.
Very sad, awkward silence.
Yeah, just like sadly walks away, like rethinking his life choices.
All
Like,
by
huh.
myself begins playing.
Yeah.
Leading into the next episode, we have a kids are alright type scene where Ruby's like, the future is now, old man! Crow saying like, this plan is stupid and crazy and we should all just give up, and Ruby's like, fuck you, Crow, I'ma still be a hero. And yeah, that's the same scene where like, oh, funny bit where they show back up at the house and Crow's passed out drunk. Oscar was there the whole time, didn't let Crow in. Kind of a dick move. Like, did Oscar just not look out the window and see Crow out there? But this looks great for the neighbors. But yeah, they're gonna steal an Atlas airship and mail ourselves there. And that leads into one of the worst episodes of this volume, stealing from the elderly.
It's all of the dumb jokes and bad, silly Atlas goons and everything, and it's awful. And Cordovan sucks. There's nothing even more to say for me.
Weiss smuggling Maria onto the airship.
So like John coming up with an idea and like doing his usual his usual like actual like strategy shit.
I mean, it's not a bad plan overall. It's one of those plans that, like, yes, Murphy's Law ends up getting applied, and it does go pear-shaped in the way that they probably should have accounted for.
Yeah, it would have worked if they weren't the main characters.
Which is that Blake doesn't disable the radar in time, so they end up picking up Maria's ship. They call him, and Maria's like, don't worry, I know all their jargon. And then she spouts off some nonsense, and they see right through the deception. It's like, damn, thought I had that. Like, no, the jargon was good. We just don't employ elderly old women. I liked that line. That was funny. It's the only joke in this that really worked. I guess the whole, like, Blake having experience shutting down Atlas Tech and then Tara being like, this conversation never happened is also fun.
Yeah. It's like, I don't want to hear that.
Blake low-key shitting on Yang for being bad at stealth is whatever. I didn't laugh or chuckle. It'd be a lot cuter if there wasn't already this weird amount of tension from them that they haven't done anything with since the Apathy episodes, but it's about to be super fucking relevant for the rest of the volume.
But so yeah, why would she need to be like, it's like, I don't know. That's not her thing. That's not her forte.
Yang is only with Blake in this scene because she's the one who knows how to ride a motorcycle or drive a motorcycle. That's the only reason why they got paired up in this.
She don't need to do that. She could just, tree hop.
Yeah, but that would take too long.
Nah.
Motorcycle's faster.
Nah.
I mean, she had to drag her motorcycle around with her this whole time because everybody else had to walk anyway, so...
But then catches on, throws a tantrum, gets on the giant robot. It's not a cooler, interesting looking robot. It's very boring and lame. It doesn't follow the same design ethos. Like, I think the intention is that this is supposed to be an older model, but it doesn't follow the same design ethos as the other Atlas mechs we've seen throughout the series, so it kind of ends up looking off. And then, yeah, turns out that the reason why Blake fucked up is because Adam had been waiting the entire time for Blake to be alone. Stalked her halfway across the continent, all for this moment.
There was never any point where she was alone.
No, there wasn't. Like, that's actually, it works. This is actually solid plotting.
All right.
Yeah, I actually never
good.
thought about that because it's true. Yeah, I never had an issue with that because there's actually no plot hole with that.
That's weird that I expected there would be and there wasn't. But you know what? Good for you guys, Rooster Teeth.
Yeah.
It just shows that RWBY isn't a very good show. Even when something is perfectly executed, it still feels wrong because it's fucking RWBY.
Oh, again, the bigger issue for me is, of course, the fact that there's no bigger build up to the Bumblebee relationship throughout this entire volume. They literally get, like, what is it, 3 scenes in the entire volume? One of them's like a few seconds, the one where Blake tries to help Yang with the bag, which isn't even something that should be, like, relevant for her trying to help her with, because, like, Yang is already been proven to be one of the strongest, like, huntresses, or like huntresses in training, whatever the fuck, who cares? And she was given a robot arm, which in this universe is probably stronger than a real arm. So why does she need help with a bag? Blake, you dumb bint?
Because Blake's a bitch.
Yeah, well, yeah, clearly. But
I mean, obviously, the true path to love is killing a stalker. That's how you do it.
I mean, it's not the worst way to do it. Like, that's the thing. So, like, okay, now that we're here, yes, my issue is that this scene is not well built up to, but, like, the scene itself and the fight is good. And at least in this, my problem with their confession scene is that they say a bunch of bullshit to each other that isn't true. Whereas in this scene, it's like what they say actually makes sense. Given the little that we have to work with, what they say makes sense. Like, we're protecting each other rather than I'm not protecting her. Yeah, it's a little cheesy, but does it make sense? Does it fit what they've been trying to go for? Yeah, it does. And so that is pretty decent. And they do help each other out and they do sacrifice for each other. And as cheesy as that is, that's nice. That does build a relationship regardless of anything else that's happened. Like, and yes, you can criticize everything else around this. I have done that myself. So I'm not saying this makes, Bumblebee fantastic. It doesn't. But I think this fight scene itself works. And it definitely kept me on this fight scene, at least, kept me on the Bumblebee train, I guess I should say. As bad as it is, it's not like any of the other ships have been done any better. So
I mean, adrenaline gets the juices flowing, like that's how it happens a lot. There's a lot of things that kind of operate off of that in regards to like relationships in movies and stuff. Indiana Jones wouldn't pull nearly as much tail as he did without going after all these sorts of artifacts and stuff.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, adrenaline is part of it. I agree with that. Yeah,
you can understand how it would have contributed, sort of. But as far as the fight scene, it was cool. The whole Adam face reveal at the end was, like I said, I don't think there's any real reason they needed it, but it sucks so much because it's like almost seemed like it was trying to cross out what they were trying to do with him for a little while there. Because I remember how we made him like a disgusting psycho. Well, we're gonna give him a different, separate motivation that we never touched on prior, and this is the only time we're ever going to bring it up once. I don't get why, because the only reason you would do that is if you wanted him to be like more sympathetic in some way. Well, that would have been cool had you pulled that off a bit earlier, but now you can't be tacking it on in the final fight that he's ever in,
My biggest complaint with this, and it is kind of a lackluster complaint to say that you want more show in your show, it feels so fucking wrong that Weiss never sees Adam. And that Blake never talks about Adam to Weiss. And that Weiss is just not involved in this plotline at all.
You would think, we brought this up so many times. The main thing that should grab her.
These 2 episodes, The Lady in the Shoe and then Seeing Red, they are structured identically, where you have half of the episode is everyone fighting the Cordovan mech, and then the other half is Blake and Yang versus Adam. And The Lady in the Shoe, it's much more Blake versus Adam. Yang only comes on in like the last minute or 2, smashes him with Bumblebee, and then smashes the audience with the Bumblebee ship moment. that they end the episode off because reaction channels. But it's a good moment. It is, it's not about one defending the other. It's about having each other's backs. That's solid friendship dynamic that could also be romantically primed. It's really the lack of a conversation between Blake and everyone, not just Yang. The fact that Blake never talks about why she left, or the fact that she left, or apologizes for that, or tells them about Adam. She never tells them about Adam. I realized that going through this volume with Dude, that, for instance, Blake explains Adam's semblance. Why? Why was this not something Blake said before? We went through 6 whole volumes at this point. We went through 3 whole volumes where Blake was part of Team RWBY, 2 whole volumes where Blake was part of Team RWBY and they were going after the White Fang. Then we had 2 volumes where they were split up, where Blake wasn't with the team, and then heading into this volume, this is a conversation that really needed to happen, and it makes Blake look like a dumb bitch for waiting until now to explain Adam's semblance. I believe I said this during the Volume 3 podcast, where it would have been really interesting if Blake brought Adam up during the scene where Yang is getting blamed for what happened with Mercury, where, Blake could have drawn comparisons to Adam and Yang going all the way back to their semblances, and maybe Blake is someone who believes that semblance are reflected in the personality or whatever, and so like, oh hey, this means that Yang and Adam are inherently similar characters. They're not really, other than the fact that all of their motivations surround getting in Blake's pants. We complained about that in Volume 5. I know, because I literally just edited that part of the podcast earlier today, where we talk about how Yang's entire go with the flow, have fun adventures motivation that she said she had in Volume 2 never comes up again, and for the last, ever since Volume 5, her motivations have been centered around Blake. All of her motivations are all Blake-centered. She doesn't have a motivation beyond getting in Blake's pants and being weirdly antagonistic towards RWBY.
Yeah, very sad. Seems like Blake doesn't actually say all that much throughout all prior episodes in the volume about much at all, really.
I mean, or any volume, to be honest. Like, we joked about the RWBY and Blake interaction.
Oh no, we completely glossed over that when we were talking about the apathy episode.
I didn't forget!
But what I just realized we haven't mentioned, like, any at all in this entire volume is Ren and Nora.
Yeah, they're just kind of there. We talked about Ren and John's combo.
Yeah. Even John had more stuff going on simply because of, like, his sisters and the big Pyrrha statue that he saw and all that. Like, those two, they didn't really have anything going on with them.
I didn't say anything about it because, like I mentioned in Volumes 4 and in Volume 5, it was like, well, they were primed at the end of Volume 4. They should have done something with them in Volume 5, and then it's just like nothing really happens with them until...
There's nothing to trigger further change in them. Like, Volume 4 was something that triggered massive change in their dynamic, and then it doesn't really change their dynamic all that much in Volumes 5 and 6. And then Volume 7, the thing that initiates change in their dynamic is something negative that drives them apart. And that's bullshit and not fun, and we don't want it.
They slacked off with them for 2 whole volumes and didn't use them for anything, only to, in the volume after that, go in with a really bad hand with them. It was really weird.
Starting to sabotage them and break them up before they're even fully together, that's lame. I would have been much more okay with that plot point if they were like an actual solid couple for a couple volumes before that. I would still hate it.
If Volume 4 was the primer, and in Volume 5 they were like warming up to it, and then Volume 6 they were kind of finally together, I'm not certain I would want them to break up the immediate volume after that. It would have been really bad either way, honestly, I think. Like, I just don't like the whole idea of, like, inserting drama into them.
Inserting drama that isn't even rooted in anything that was a thing before.
Talking about what happens to Nora in Volume 8?
It's okay. You can mute us if you want.
Yes, Coop, I agree with you, Coop. Thank you for backing me up. Thank you for bringing that up before I even did. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for stroking my ego, dude, and now I will stroke yours by backstabbing media again and joining your side once more.
It's still 2-2.
This volume is shit.
I am the Starscream of this volume, much like Cordovan is.
Do not utter their names in succession like that. There are bits of the Cordovan fight that I like, particularly with Ruby and Weiss, when Ruby does something suicidally insane and then Weiss catches her, and Ruby's like, thanks. And Weiss is like, Ruby, I swear to God, if my hair wasn't white at birth, it'd be going white over stress over your nonsense. What if I didn't catch you like I knew you would? That's not an answer, Ruby! God damn it! Next you'll be drinking suicide tea.
Ruby and Weiss in general do have a very good dynamic. I wish like all of the team got better dynamics along with each other, like there was more of a web of dynamics going on between characters. A lot of this stuff gets overlooked. So
this volume kind of introduced the possibility of Jean, Nora, and Ren dipping out of the plot and just being local huntsmen for Argus. They deny that call to stick with Ruby, which is fine, but like, if you're gonna keep them around, do something with them. Nora and Ren don't really interact with the rest of the gang, other than like Ruby and Jean. And Nora has a little bit of an interplay with Yang, but like Ren and Blake don't talk. Ren and Weiss don't talk. Ren and Yang only talk in Volume 8 due to circumstances. Nora doesn't talk to Weiss or Blake. None of them have any real interaction or interplay with Crow. Ruby is the only one who does. Like, not even Yang.
there's a variety of things that you can do with each one of those too. You know, they have things that you know could bring them together over certain stuff. Like Yang trying to get in Blake's pants might be a good reason for her to talk to Nora because she kind of gets the vibe that she and Ren are together now or something. I don't know. You could have all sorts of interactions that go on between them, I feel like.
Having a lot of characters isn't inherently a bad thing. It's finding ways to utilize them in fun, interesting ways. The way a lot of shows get around doing this is by splitting up the cast. RWBY is no stranger to this. That was the whole premise of Volume 4. Splitting up the main cast and then giving them their own, like, storylines to go on. Blake had her parents and son. Weiss had Klein, Whitley, and her dad, and a little bit of Ironwood. Yang had Ty, Oobleck, and Port. RWBY had Team Ranger and Crow, and they kind of went from there, and it was fine. Like, Volume 4 was better more times than not. Volume 6 does that a little bit, but not really. Like, Volume 6 does split up the gang for about half of the volume, but then when they reunite, there's not really anything that changes. They're all just kind of there along for the ride, and like I said, they don't have any foils, they don't have any interesting interplays, they don't ever break up in interesting ways. That's a problem with Volume 7. Right now, like, my biggest complaint with Volume 7 is that the character dynamics feel very stale. And the character dynamics are kind of growing stale here. Like, this is the first time since Volume 3 that the whole gang is back together for an entire volume, and they're just kind of running from one location, one set piece to the next. And yes, there are interesting character arcs happening in the background as that happens. You know, with the apathy and Weiss's role in that, and RWBY and Crow, and Oscar fighting back against Ozpin is all really interesting stuff. Maria goes through her own little character arc throughout that whole experience, but it doesn't feel like enough, and it feels like there's so many characters who are just here to eat up screen time. And that's a problem that Volume 4, and even Volume 5 didn't really have. Volume 5 had plenty of other problems on its plate, but characters being there just for the sake of them being there wasn't really one of them. Granted, it kind of was because they didn't give any of the characters anything interesting to do, but that was because the whole plot wasn't interesting, but that's a whole different complaint than what I'm saying. You get my point.
There is a large, heavily interwoven mesh of things that are bad about each volume that affect the next volume in ways that cause the next volume to be bad, but in different ways.
Every volume of RWBY is bad, but in a completely different way.
Yeah, that's just RWBY in a nutshell.
It's a strange, chaotic ripple effect across time that manifests itself in different ways, no matter which volume you're watching.
It's kind of the fascinating thing about watching the show, and what makes it so fun to engage with, is that you never know how they're gonna fuck it up.
You know they're gonna fuck it up, you just don't know how. Yeah, that's very true.
Like, so many other bad shows are just bad in the same exact way the whole time.
It's like
Yes,
they're
yeah.
running like a big machine, like that's got like a bunch of valves, and if they turn one, then another like all across the room like starts bursting out steam, and they got to run over to that one and turn it, and it causes like another explosion somewhere. They're constantly just running back and forth like a Looney Tunes skit, fixing things that cause another problem somewhere else.
Acme ass manufacturing.
Yeah, it's wild. It is a deep structural issue that's insanely it's fascinating to watch. It's hypnotic in a way almost.
Getting into a little more detail about episode 12, Seeing Red. The fight between Yang and Adam is apparently, they reanimated it by hand because it's a completely different engine, but they modeled it after what the original Yang versus Adam fight was going to be before Carrie decided that Yang was just going to get one shot, which is one of the reasons why it probably feels much more like a Monty fight. Yang and Blake, they have good teamwork. They make a good team. I'm not just saying that for shipping reasons. I don't really care about the ship. I am neutral on Bumblebee at best, and fucking hate Blake at worst.
Fair.
I
fair.
mostly don't like Bumblebee because I feel it does a disservice to bees to associate them with it. The bee is a noble creature, and I don't want them to have their name besmirched by having to be on board with such a ship.
Even though they do have a lot of cool little combos, they don't do what I think is the obvious thing, which is that Yang should just straight up punch through one of Blake's clones. Like, Blake blocks an attack and then Yang punches through her. Like, I think that would be so fucking metal, and they never do it. That was like their fucking standard operating procedure when I was writing fight scenes around them, back when I was doing RWBY On.
I forget, in this one, does Blake do the thing where she makes the exploding dust-infused clones? Or that's always been like one of my favorite things that she can do with the clones.
Yeah, no, I'm not seeing any instances of her using exploding clones.
Well, I mean, if they're missing one gimmick, they gotta patch it with another gimmick. You can't have no gimmicks in a fight.
The gimmick here is that Blake lost her coat and looks a million times hotter for it.
Yeah, I
Real,
remember. I do
real.
remember that part. At that point, I was just like, "Really, guys, you couldn't have just done this before." I get it; they were in the snow before, so obviously you couldn't do it there. But as soon as they were in the city, I wanted that thing gone.
Oh, episode 11, I think, had, like, the worst cut in the entire series, which is when they fire the missile at Cordovan, and then she, like, catches it, but it's so horribly edited that it's almost impossible to follow, and that's, like, the cliffhanger that part of the plot episode 11 ends on. But then nothing happens. They dodge the missile, but then get shot down by something else anyway, and then Ozpin saves the day. RWBY fucking rocks. She literally stares down the barrel of that fucking cannon and is like, I have an idea. It's a suicidal idea, and it won't be the last time I have a suicidal idea, but it's gonna work. And it does. It works long enough for them to, like, get out of Dodge, which is her causing the whole, like, dust crystal to rupture from inside the cannon. Then Weiss and Crow have to, like, Weiss slows her down and then Crow catches her using her black glyphs. Still don't know how they work, like what properties they actually have. She won. She saved the day, saved the gang, and fucked everything up by doing so.
Yatta!
Because that's the way that this story is written. It gets better. And then, yeah, we get Blake and Yang versus Adam. Cool fight. Adam dies. A lot more exciting than the part of the fight we saw in episode 11. A lot more intense. A couple weird cuts, but whatever. Then, yeah, Blake and Yang have their very tender moment that convinced a lot of people that the ship was already canon when it wasn't yet. It's just two girls being a little touchy-feely with each other, as girls do sometimes.
God, I still the
Yeah,
community.
it's true. Even as a Bumblebee shipper, it's like, no, it's not confirmed at that point. Is it getting there? Fuck yeah.
Then, of course, we have to end on some bullshit, so the Leviathan is coming. That's the cliffhanger. Leading into the finale, Our Way.
Lame. That's all I have to say about this episode. Just, who cares? I
I
already said,
mean-
like, who gives a shit? Like, just no one remembers any of this. I didn't remember any of this. I'm gonna forget all of this in a while.
We start off with the reveal of Cinder and Neo's outfits, and they're lucky that they're just naturally hot, because these outfits are not it.
They're getting propped up by a couple of things, if you know what I mean.
And yeah, the Leviathan is attacking Argus. The mech was apparently for these specific situations, but now it's like out of commission until it's not. I would just come out and say it. That's the biggest piece of bullshit it in this episode, and it's actually my biggest complaint with this whole volume. As far as like a small, like one-off complaint type stuff, I have a bigger problem with this than I do anything else involving Cordovan. Cordovan didn't really bother me all that much, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I'm not really.
Y'all are crazy. You all are crazy.
Like, I have a higher tolerance than Dude when it comes to this bullshit. She's still F tier. She still sucks. She's still lame. I still complain about her all the time. But it didn't, like, make me want to turn off the episode or make me want to just pause so I can take a break from RWBY ever. Like, it never took me out of it the way that a lot of things from, like, Volume 5 or even the Blake stuff in Volume 4 did. But I fucking hate that she fucking comes in after the robot is supposed to be out of commission. She comes back in and scores the final blow against the Leviathan. What the fuck is that bullshit?
Another reason why RWBY using her silver eyes for the first time actively is so forgettable, and that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah, way to fucking undercut that, by the way. With this big triumphant moment for RWBY in an episode where RWBY has been fucking locked in the whole time. In a volume where RWBY has been in top form. Like, this is peak RWBY in a lot of ways.
Peak RWBY Rose, not peak RWBY the show, but definitely peak RWBY Rose. I will agree with that. RWBY Rose herself has been very good this volume. I can't argue that. But the problem is things get undercut for her due to things outside of her own control. And that sucks.
Like, I fucking hate that. I hate that this keeps happening, too. And it wasn't until Dude and I were watching this volume. I always had that complaint about Volume 5, but it wasn't until this that I realized that this happens in most of the volumes. Volume 1, Penny is the one who saves the day. Volume 2, it's Team Coffee. Volume 3, one of the best volumes, RWBY fucking scores the final hit. Volume 4, Rin scores the final hit, but he earned it, because it's his villain, it's his emotional climax.
And RWBY helped a lot, too. It's not like she wasn't a major part of it.
And RWBY helped a lot. Like, RWBY was fucking locked in. RWBY fired way more shots in that fight than she should have. How many bullets does Crescent Rose have in each one of its clips?
Yes.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, man.
Volume 5, Raven is the one who takes out Cinder. Volume 6, Cordovan is the one who takes out the Leviathan. Volume 7, RWBY does actually technically take out Cinder, but Winter and Penny put in most of the work. And then Ironwood deals with the actual main villain, which is Watts, but he did that like 3-4 episodes earlier.
They lose in Volume 8.
Yeah, and then Volume 8 was just an abject loss.
And then RWBY is the reason they win in Volume 9.
2 of the best volumes, Volumes 4 and 9, and 3, 3 of the 4 best volumes.
I'd argue at this point, those are the 3 best volumes.
They earn the final victory. Here, it's robbed from them. It's like, why? Why do that?
By a really lame, bad character, too.
Yeah. Why have this? Like, what is the thought process behind doing that? Like, if they wanted to show Cordovan have like a bit of a face turn and have her on the radio after RWBY takes care of the Leviathan, then have Cordovan be like, alright guys, you know what? Since you helped clean up this mess, I'm gonna let you go. Like, you could have still had that moment with Cordovan. That's a fine moment by itself, but just her coming in with the drill hand, and also that shot, the frame rate drops for some reason. Like, they didn't render that scene properly. But it just, it's so lame. It's so lame. And the rest of this episode is so good. The rest of this episode is so good, other than, again, the Cinder Neo outfits not being the best. Because, like, RWBY comes up with this plan to use her silver eyes. Trial by fire. Just like Maria was saying earlier in the volume. And she keeps getting these, like, calls from Weiss. Because Weiss is stressing the fuck out. Which is stressing RWBY out. So she, like, throws her little earbud in the water. Just throws it away. And then it doesn't work. Because she is thinking about her friends, and that inevitably causes her to think about her dead friends, like Pyrrha and Penny, technically, I guess. And also, like, the fact that Ying lost her arm, and she's thinking about all the things that she's lost, all the trauma that they've gone through, and that causes her silver eyes to not work, so she uses Jin. It comes back. The relic of knowledge, the fact that it's able to freeze time in order to explain shit, comes back. RWBY doesn't ask it a question, which does come back into play later. RWBY could have saved herself a lot of grief if she just thought of, like, what's the average?
What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow?
If she just said that, just to get the question out of the way. She could have saved herself a ton ton of grief for volumes 8 and 9.
And then Jin would have asked, what do you mean, African or European swallow? And then Ruby would have been like, what? I don't know. And then she gets vored by the fucking Grimm. The end of the series, the end.
If this was a video game, that's a QTE failed.
If Ruby was better and more popular than fucking, what's the fucking Comedy Central show? They would have made a parody that would have done that. The one that uses, they did like a joke where they used Buzz Lightyear as a bong. Robot Chicken.
That was Adult Swim.
Yeah.
Okay, Adult Swim, sorry. But I could see like a Robot Chicken of Ruby that would have done that if Ruby was big enough to be on Robot Chicken. It's not.
Yeah,
you
well,
know.
yeah, but even as like someone who's like, I still like. I mean, I kind of like Cordovan, but like, and I don't see a problem with her as a character to begin with. But like, and I like the giant mech with the drill. It's a very good anime reference. But I completely agree with Media and you all that should not have happened. That was stupid.
Yeah, no.
It's a crime.
Letting her
That's an
grab the
absolute
kill,
crime.
That does kind of suck.
Which again, it's like it makes people forget about the impactful moment that Ruby is supposed to have just had.
I want to go through her memories because so many of them are fucking adorable. First one is Tai with baby Yang wearing her little yellow ascot and her pigtails with the red wagon from the Volume 2 flashback. The same wagon that she damn near died in because of Yang's stupidity. We get the Zwei introduction with Blake jumping like a cat. That was fun. Then we get a food fight, even though that happened before Zwei. These memories are very clearly not in chronological order, but it is a banzai! The Weiss having her credit card rejected in Volume 3. Such a shit. Happy memories! This scene!
Okay, I do, okay, that's a good reference to Ruby being a gremlin right there. I like that.
Cheeky little. I didn't even catch.
I'm Weiss. I'm rich. I just got my allowance taken out.
I actually didn't catch that. That's
It reminds me of Winter, like, how embarrassing. I know, right? Well, it was!
And meanwhile, Ruby's just giggling. Like, ha ha ha, now you know what it's like to be poor.
And now Weiss is the poorest out of all of them. Ow, the turntables.
And then her and Penny together. Jean vomiting. Again, Ruby. What the fuck? Happy memories. Vomit boy. Goes from that scene to the scene in Volume 3 when Nora's like, aim it at the enemy. Nora, that's gross. But if you do feel the urge. And then it goes from that to Pierre. Like, these are actually pretty well structured, even though they're not in chronological order. It makes sense that they are in the, like, sequence of association. That, like, oh, thinking about that makes me think about Vomit Boy, makes me think about the time that Nora threatened to aim it at the enemy, makes me think about Pyrrha, makes me think about Jean mourning Pyrrha's death, which makes me think about Yang losing her arm, Yang being depressed, Pyrrha dying, Penny dying, and then that's when she freezes up, and then when she starts thinking about the happy memories again, they're bunk beds on the first day of school, and they put it to a vote. It's the same shot. Then Weiss giving her the coffee, very sweet, very foundational to their relationship. Blake cheering Team Ruby when Weiss is fighting the Borbatusk, which was weirdly out of character for Blake at that point, but it happened, and this reinforces that it happened. Them sitting on the docks at the end of Volume 2, after a job well done. Jean in the dress, dancing with Pyrrha. Team Juniper in the Vital Festival tournament. That's when time starts to pick back up. And then Uncle Crow, Oscar, Maria, Penny revealing that she's a robot. And then Summer, fully rendered, not just a picture, Summer Rose. And she's not actually just a palette swap of Ruby, which is cool. It's not the full reveal that we would get later on in Volume 9, but it is kind of getting there. And then really cool shot of Summer's silver eyes fading into Ruby's as they activate and freeze the Grimm, only for that to be undercut, but we already complained about that. I would like to see more moments of this, of the characters actually, like, reflecting back. Like, what is it about this plot and about these events that have stuck with the characters? Because they don't really talk much about things outside of the plot at hand, which makes the plot feel stale a lot of times, and it certainly makes the character arcs feel very stale, because they kind of just seem to be along for the ride, not really having a whole lot of agency in what's going on. So it's really nice to see the character who has exhibited the most agency throughout this whole volume really reflect back on, like, what is, or what are her pleasant memories? What is it that she is fighting for? What is the world she wants to create? What is her pathos? I talked last time about how Weiss is the only character who consistently has pathos. This is a moment where RWBY exhibits pathos of her own, and we don't get a whole lot of that from RWBY going forward. Not just the character, but also the show as well, even with Weiss heading into the Atlas saga. This is kind of a last moment of triumph for this Mistral saga, which has been more disastrous than not, but mostly in the middle there with Volume 5, but you had the Blake stuff in Volume 4, and then the inconsistencies with this volume. But yeah, and then when they try to congratulate RWBY, she's more about like just doing her part and doing what she can when she can. She's not really in it for the praise, which is why she doesn't respond well to the praise that they lavish her with, and she tries to deflect like, did you see Oscar? Did you see Oscar? He did a crash landing. He's like 8. He's a farm boy who's never flown a plane before. And then Oscar reveals that he still hasn't flown a plane before. It was Osmond.
Buh. Buh.
Yeah, and Crow learns his lesson that, it's time to pass the torch to the new generation and maybe stop being an alcoholic and start being a boring fucking character.
I think they probably should have let him just stay here after that, maybe, just let him be like, okay, kids, you go.
He has a very important logical role to play in the early parts of Volume 7, which is getting them the introduction to Ironwood, or getting them the audience with Ironwood, which could have maybe not needed him.
You got Weiss.
Considering, come to think of it, what does Crow contribute to Volume 7 that could be just attributed to one of the other characters?
Fujoshi bait?
Jason Liebrecht joining the cast. Maria's like, you weren't half bad yourself, even though he kind of fucking was half bad, and other half boring. Yeah, and then they all live happily ever after until the next volume. And then we get a pointless post-credit scene that doesn't actually contribute to anything. She's making a bunch of flying Gorilla Grimm that don't matter.
Yeah, I never got that. I was like, oh, cool.
They're in the background of Volume 8 a few times, but that's it.
We get more new cannon fodder. That's what's going on. I guess, I don't know.
Ooh, wow, so threatening.
It gives us the slight information that Salem is able to custom make Grimm, which is not
She basically owns like a Build-A-Bear workshop, but it's Grimm.
I guess it kind of sort of like ties into the Hound a little bit, but it doesn't really hint at that. I am kind of wondering why they would put that in
as the post-credit scene. They've done a horrible job at picking post-credit scenes since the beginning. This is just another one.
I generally don't like the concept of a post-credit scene at all, like in anything, really. I hated when Marvel did it, and it was all downhill from there every time.
Okay, so it makes sense in a movie from a business standpoint, because you're trying to basically con the audience into sitting through the credits so that everyone can get like their proper gradation, even though no one actually pays attention during the credits. They're all looking at their phone at that time. But it still serves like kind of a function.
And I remember when it was first introduced, it wasn't like they told anyone. The whole point of it was that it was a surprise. So a lot of people didn't bother sitting through the credits the first time.
I'm one of them.
It came out later that there was a post-credit scene, so a lot of people had to wait, because around that era, you had to wait for like the fucking DVD to come out. You other old heads remember? You had to wait for that, and then fast forward all the way to the end of the credits to see the same scene that anyone else had.
My final point, and the point I really want to make, is that of the 6 volumes we have done this retrospective series on, I have to say Volume 6 is still my favorite. There's so many things that I adore about this volume, and as much as I do want to harp on all the same things that y'all want to harp on, and possibly even more so, because there are some things that very specifically piss me off about this volume, it's still the closest thing we've gotten to the RWBY show that I've always wanted. And the bullshit at least pushes something forward. There's not an episode that I would want to skip. There's not a character arc that I wish was just completely cut. Reworked, rewritten, recharacterized, sure, but never outright cut. There's not anything in this volume that makes me hate the volume more than I already did.
I can agree with that.
You're gonna tell me you don't wish they got rid of the whole Lost Fable episode?
I think that there's enough important information in that episode. It could have been cut down. You cut the god stuff out of it, but the whole general point of Osmond being low-key complacent in Salem's creation and also not having a plan and Salem being immortal, that directly leads to the apathy. Like, that's the stuff that the apathy feeds into. You can't really have the apathy be what they are without having the revelations that came with the Lost Fable. And that's where I'm of two minds of this, because the bad stuff is not quarantined. All the bad stuff in Volume 4 was quarantined to one plot line and then one episode from another plot line. The bad stuff in Volume 2 was mostly quarantined to their respective little storylines. The bad stuff in Volume 6 is kind of throughout the entirety of Volume 6. So you can't really fix the problems without reworking a lot of the rest of the volume as well. And because the complaints are what they are, it makes the volume a lot duller than prior volume. I feel like we've been talking about this longer than we even talked about Volume 5, but I also feel like there's just not as much to really sink our teeth into. The good stuff is just kind of good, and the bad stuff is just kind of bad. And I feel like that makes this volume kind of a trendsetter, because if I remember correctly, and I do have a pretty good memory about this stuff, Volume 7 and 8 are going to be suffering from a lot of the same types of problems.
Yes, okay, that I do totally agree with.
That's why, like, I do have to caveat my statement with saying that, like, this is still my favorite episode so far, or my favorite volume so far. The highs of Volume 4, I think, are higher, but the lows of Volume 4 are also a lot lower. It's same thing with Volumes 1, 2, and 3, I think. Highs are higher, lows are lower. Volume 6 is just kind of okay. Like, it's just kind of okay for most of its runtime. Which, for me, that is in some ways an improvement, in some ways to its detriment, but at the end of the day, this is still the closest thing to what I wanted the show to be like in the first place. I wish this was the standard. I wish this was a mediocre volume of RWBY by RWBY standards, but it's not. I can't lie to myself and say that I didn't enjoy most of this volume.
I think it's as good a time as any for me to say that my constant shifting back and forth of loyalties was all a ruse. I was in it for myself the whole time, and now my little fingering plot has come to fruition for me to say that I did actually find the volume mediocre. I didn't think it was super bad like Dude did, and I didn't like it a whole lot like Media did. I think Volume 6 is actually kind of like one of the ones I would put in the middle of RWBY, ironically enough, since it was also roughly in the middle of RWBY.
It is very mid. So to agree with Coop and Media, like, after listening to everything everybody's had to say with our discussion today, is my opinion a little higher than it was when Media and I last watched the volume? Yes, I will admit it is. But is my opinion also much lower on this volume than it used to be back, the first several times I watched it? Yes, that's also the case. Numbers wise, I have it even lower than Volume 2. Is it worse than Volume 2? No, it's probably better than it is better than Volume 2. I mean, just the apathy arc alone should put it above Volume 2. That's so far and away better than anything that's in Volume 2. And I think it is very important that even if RWBY does get jobbed by Maria at the end, RWBY is some of the best she's ever been in this volume, and that is extremely important. Blake and Yang, as much as their relationship doesn't get developed as much as it should have been, at least the 3 scenes they do get are all good. Ren and Nora don't really do jack shit, but at least they're not made worse like they are in Volume 8. Oscar, my biggest problems with Oscar are that he doesn't continue what he does do in this volume. So again, this is arguably the best Oscar has ever been. So that's another point toward Media on that case. My issue is that, my many issues are, I think my reaction is more reacting to how much we as a group used to like this volume and how much I probably just drank Media's Kool-Aid back in the day liking this volume. And I'm not saying Media's wrong to think what he thinks.
Even that's like, my enjoyment of this volume has a lot more caveats than it did, and I wonder how much of that was recency bias on my part coming off of Volume 5.
Because, so my biggest thing with this volume is that, in fairness, the main cast is fine. They're not great. They're not bad, but I prefer high highs and low lows, I guess is what I should say. And this volume doesn't really have that. It's just like that perfect balance, that it's in that perfect position where there's big lore reveals that really hurt the volume in the future, and a lot of the good stuff that does happen in this volume does not get followed up on in any way and ends up being completely meaningless. And there's not really that much good stuff that happens with most of the characters, because even the biggest good thing that happens with RWBY gets so overshadowed and is so forgotten. So it's like there's nothing great that happens with any characters. At least in volume 1, we have things like RWBY's just basic characterization is so fantastic in volume 1. And honestly, the basic world building in volume 1, I would argue that's like kind of, I could say, either the trailer or volume 1 is kind of the peak of RWBY as a show's world building. It's the most intriguing and interesting there. I think the dynamic between the main characters is actually pretty good in that volume and in volume 2. I love that we get their motivations, and then like the whole thing with fucking Oobleck questioning their reason for becoming huntresses. To me, there's nothing that great or meaningful or impactful with the characters in volume 6. Because yes, RWBY uses her silver eyes, but it doesn't feel her using her silver eyes at the end of volume 6 has any meaning ever again in the rest of the series so far. And that really fucking sucks. That's one of my biggest issues. Whereas like volume 3, Yang losing her arm is a huge fucking deal. Volume 4, Ren and Nora, Ren conquering his thing, that's a big fucking deal. Yang going through her arc is a big fucking deal. Volume 5 is obviously complete garbage. Like we don't have to talk about that. But like I had a better time. If I'm rewatching volumes, I think I would rewatch every volume except for volume 5 over this one. So far. We haven't done volume 7, 8, and 9 yet. And my opinion has changed so much on this one that I'm very genuinely curious how I'm going to feel about 7, 8, and 9. I expect volume 9 will still be my favorite, but this volume is so aimless feeling, and yes, it is not the worst. Like I said, there's no episode in this one that's as bad as episodes in most of the other volumes, right? And it does have, in my opinion, actually the best episode, but that episode doesn't have the most impact. It's just like a really good bubble episode.
Yeah, which I've also gone on record of saying that I would have preferred that from this series.
Yeah, and so that fits your preferences and everything, but because RWBY is not that show, I can't praise that episode as much. Does that make sense? Like, I think this is kind of like, we're just gonna, and I'm fine with agreeing to disagree here.
Let's actually get into our episode ranking. I'll go first. At the very bottom of the list, The Lost Fable, and then I have Lost, which is the Pyrrha statue episode, which we didn't talk about Pyrrha's mom, allegedly, but like, fuck was that about? Dead End, which is the episode that was right before that. That is the biggest Cordovan episode. Also, big Cordovan episode is my number 11 spot, which is Stealing from the Elderly. The only reason why that's above Dead End is because that's also the episode where Blake loses her coat. I can't actually remember if that's the episode where Blake loses her coat. This is the fight Blake versus Adam starts at that episode. In the 10th spot, I have the Adam character short, and then I have Our Way. The Grimm Reaper is number 8. I have Argus Limited in the 7th spot, Lady in the Shoe in the 6th spot, big Blake versus Adam fight in the start of the Cordovan fight. Then, so that's how it is in the 5th spot. Seeing Red is in the 4th spot, that's the Adam Death episode. In the 3rd spot, I have Uncovered, and then number 2, I have The Coming Storm, and number 1, Alone in the Woods.
So, last place for me is also The Lost Fable. I actually have Stealing from the Elderly second to last, and then after that is Our Way, then Argus Limited. I probably have that one lower than I should. Then is The Lady in the Shoe. Then is the Adam character short. Then Lost. Then Seeing Red. Then Dead End. Then So That's How It Is. Then Uncovered. And then The Grimm Reaper. And then The Coming Storm, and then number 1, Alone in the Woods, which is, in fairness, it is my highest rated RWBY episode of all time. It's the only thing I have so far that's a perfect 100 out of 100. I could not see myself changing anything about that episode. Even if my complaint is that it's just kind of a bubble episode, like, yeah, that's how it's conceived, so it is still the best version of itself it could possibly be. And it's not completely a bubble thing. It does start off the whole thing of RWBY being able to use her silver eyes. The issue with that not coming back more is an issue, honestly, with later volumes, not even this volume. That's another thing, is like this volume, honestly, a lot of its points that I'm taking off, a lot of it has to do with later volumes. So maybe I am being a little harsh on this volume, but I just can't enjoy it the way I used to, knowing that so much of this gets fucked over.
Well,
and that's weird because a lot of stuff I love in volumes 4 and 3 gets.
I mean, that's part of the point of having a retrospective the way we're doing, is we're going in these with the benefit of hindsight.
well,
And it's weird. I don't know why this one all of a sudden is pissing me off more,
I-
while 3 and 4 have the same problems of like so much shit doesn't get followed up on properly.
I think
But-
actually this volume, if I were to look at it, I think kind of you guys going over it makes me feel as though they were trying to use this volume as a sort of means by which to wrap up a whole lot of stuff. Like the Atom thing is like the most apparent there, but if you think about it, like the whole mystery regarding Ozpin, that gets solved here. You got Ruby's Silver Eyes, that gets pretty much revealed all that you need to know about it. Basically, like anything that they felt was kind of like left over that needed explaining, it seemed like that was sort of the thing. And they wanted to kind of go into the volume 7 with a sort of cleaner slate so that they didn't have to bother with a whole lot of stuff later, which I get because the cast is pretty packed and not wanting to have to deal with a lot of stuff might be a part of it. I think the reason that they didn't come back to stuff was because they felt that they had probably handled it pretty much well enough in this volume, which we can disagree with them on that. But I think that might have been like the motivation behind a lot of it.
Final question. Who benefits the most and least from this volume?
RWBY benefits the most, easily. It's not even close.
RWBY certainly benefits the most compared to Volume 5, but I still feel like this was more of a return to form. I think Weiss and all of her reactions to all of the bullshit is very underrated, which is insane to think about considering how much of a fan favorite she is for the entirety of the series. But I think the one who actually benefits the most is Oscar. From this volume specifically, in isolation, Oscar is more of a character now than he's ever been, which is exponentially better than what he was in the prior 2 volumes.
It's funny you say that because I was going to say that Ozpin benefits the least.
Ozpin's just been in the gutter since, Volume 2. I would say Crow benefits the least, because this is the death of him as an interesting character.
Crow's a good choice, too. Yeah, I would also say Team Ranger.
Yeah, Jean gets quite a bit of character stuff to do, but yeah, Ren and Nora are just kind of there.
And that's the thing with this volume, though. Honestly, this is what I think is doesn't really feel like anybody benefits a ton, and it doesn't really feel like anybody is disserviced more than they already were. It's just that's kind of my thought on this volume, is it just kind of bleh, right? Whereas all the other volumes, I can think of who benefits the most and who benefits the least, and things stick out to me more. Whereas this is just kind of nobody really benefits a ton. RWBY benefits the most, but she's the main character, she kind of should. But anybody else, I don't really feel like anybody benefits a lot. I don't feel like Oscar benefits a ton because, again, he does in one scene, basically, and nowhere else. I actually think he's kind of damaged by some of the other stuff that happens in the later part of the volume. So that I actually don't agree with. And I don't feel like anybody's super disserviced, except for John, Ren, and Nora just don't really do jack shit.
I think Blake is actually disserviced by it because they cut out the last thing that was doing anything for her character other than Yang, essentially.
I can see that.
I disagree with that because Blake is the best she is in the entire series in the next 3 volumes.
Well, mostly because she doesn't have anything going on with her.
Yeah, but the thing is, Blake is so bad throughout the rest of the series that's an improvement.
We'll get to that next time. Thank you all for watching. We've been going on way longer than I thought we would. Like, comment, subscribe, read my books. Keep an eye out for 2 non-RWBY related lengthy videos that will be coming out before I start editing the Volume 7 podcast. I'll be editing this before I edit those 2.
Oh, I know what both of those are. Coop and I are in one of those.
The other one is me by myself, just talking some mad shit about a movie that people like. Thank you all for watching. Bye.